Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. It is a gorgeous day here in Chicago. Although my dog and I got rained on very early this morning, it has cleared up. The sun is out. I took some time this morning and went down to Operation Rainbow Push, where, like many places today, they are organizing and talking about voting rights and this race-based attack that has no place in modern America, but is what we're living with. This is the result of years of work of the right wing, and it's appalling, and we must not let it stand. But that's not where I'm going to start today. We'll catch up with that later. I want to start with, really, what an epic fail that China summit was. There it was on display for everyone. Trump's gaping awe at the imperial power of China's communist leader, and it just mirrors his gaping awe again at the imperial power of that other dictatorship, Russia. Trump loves these guys, and he's jealous. They don't have to do pesky things like financial disclosures or allow a free press. He really wants their lives. He famously told us, remember? China was responsible for the COVID pandemic, he said, the China virus. He blamed them. A million Americans died. He said they shouldn't be allowed to buy American land. They're buying up our land. He said their students should get visas here. He told us he would impose 150% tariffs on China because he said they've been cheating us for years. Never mind. Oops. Never mind. They fed him dinner on gold-rimmed plates in their most exclusive retreat. President Xi talked about Taiwan, matters to them. If Trump had a point of view about that democracy, we didn't hear it. We didn't hear him mention the word freedom even once. That's the sort of thing American presidents do when they visit countries that surveil their people and lock whole ethnic groups in forced labor camps. Didn't hear it from him. Did he at least negotiate a new trade framework? He did not. Did he do anything to restrain, China's expansive territorial claims across the South China Sea, all the way to the Philippines? He did not. Did he win concessions on anything? He did not. The summit was as useless as when he rolled out the red carpet for Putin in Alaska saying there'll be peace in Ukraine. Nope. And you know what? Trump doesn't care about any of that. What does he care about? Well, the grifter in chief brought with him the CEOs of some of America's biggest companies, the CEOs of Apple, of Boeing, of NVIDIA. And I'd like to think they were there to help promote American interests, invest in our country to showcase what American tech leadership is and to show what a free people can accomplish. But that's not why they were invited. Like all employees of the federal government, Donald Trump files mandatory ethics disclosures. And his disclosure in May revealed more than 30 investments of between $1 and $5 million just this year. And that's a lot of money. And these are his personal investments. And the report showed that, he invested in Boeing, in Oracle, in Microsoft, and NVIDIA, in Apple. My God, every other president in memory puts his personal wealth in a blind trust so there are no conflicting interests. Not Donald Trump. He invested his personal money in companies this year while he was planning a summit. And he chose to bring the CEOs of those companies with him to China to win deals. Let me say that differently. He invested in companies and he chose to use the power of the American presidency to make those investments for him more valuable. That's our president. What a wasted summit. On Air Force One heading home, he had this to say about the experience. China has a ballroom, so the USA, so should the USA. That's what he said. My God, is there a single American surprised by his grotesque and criminal conduct? There isn't, not one. I mean, Donald Trump has flushed down one of his golden toilets our sense of decency, our judgment about good conduct, our expectation that government leaders work for us. As you know, Donald Trump is suing the government of the United States for $10 billion. And never mind that we taxpayers are defended by people who work for Donald Trump. This absurdity is you know, unimaginable in a working democracy. And this week we learned that the Justice Department, and it's Mr. Trump's Justice Department, is considering settling that suit, not litigating it, but settling it for $1.7 billion of your money and using that money to set up a fund to pay a bonus to everyone convicted of trying to overturn the democracy on January 6th. That's right, you heard me right. Donald Trump wants you to pay them for all they suffered when they failed to overturn our democracy. My God, the next thing you know, he's going to offer the open AG job to the ousted Hungarian dictator Viktor Orban. But I wish I was joking. None of it's a joke. Our country is hurting. Gas prices are shockingly high. Electricity costs are soaring and just in time for air conditioning season. Housing prices remain high. Oh, housing prices. Remember, Donald Trump told us that housing prices would come down because he was going to make a lot of properties vacant by deporting millions of immigrants. His ICE cruelties continue, deportations continue, but it turns out he, and by the way, the New York Times reported it this way, were wrong. Deportations are not a housing policy. So people are hurting. You know, the immigrants that he is rounding up are hurting. The people in rural America whose hospitals are closing and who's lost markets for their food, can't get fertilizer, they're hurting. Ranchers, foreclosures are up. Farm foreclosures are up. Rural America's hurting. Our cities are hurting. What they're doing to California, not giving them money for Medicaid, it's criminal and painful. Meanwhile, across the former Confederacy, they are partying like it's 1952. Now it's hard even to talk about. I mean, the power-drunk majority on the Supreme Court opined that racism is no longer a thing and that laws protecting people on account of race, well, they're illegal. So, boom, just like that. Alabama, Louisiana, South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia, and Tennessee are racing to get rid of black elected officials and to break up black communities into multiple districts where their votes won't matter. This week, the good people running Knox County, Tennessee, banned Alex Haley's book, Roots, from school libraries. They banned Roots. But John Roberts doesn't see racism anywhere. I guess his house doesn't have any mirrors. My God, the country is hurting economically, socially, and spiritually. What does Trump do? He invites religious leaders to pray in front of a golden statue of himself. And you know what? A bunch did. Donald Trump has just now dropped, you remember those tidy bowl pods? Well, he's dropped them in the reflecting pool on the National Mall to turn it blue. Because for him, if the world can't be his oyster, he's determined to make it his toilet. Our country is hurting and Trump doesn't care. He said so himself this week. When a reporter asked if American, financial stress weighed on him as he was negotiating with Iran, he said, not even a little bit. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. And then when he went on Fox News and they tried to help him, walk that comment back, he walked it further forward. He does not give a damn about anybody. But here's the thing. My friends, Americans are going to have the last laugh because come November, that great flushing sound you is going to be the sound of MAGA going down the drain. They just can't gerrymander their way out of being this miserably unpopular. Thank goodness. I have a great show. We're going to talk about all of this today, starting with the fabulous data journalist G.
Edwin
Elliott Morris.
Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
So G. Elliott Morris is back. Let's try that again.
Yeah.
G. Elliott Morris is back. He is, as some of you will remember, the author of the perfectly named Substack publication, Strength in Numbers. And saying it's a Substack publication is, of course, we don't really have the language for this because it's not just things that get published. It's also a set of podcasts, a set of videos. It's a lot of interviews. So, it's a whole world of content. And it's great. So you should definitely go to Strength in Numbers. It's going to help you in the next few months keep your sanity. He's a data-driven journalist, an enormously smart consumer of polling data. And thank you for joining me again.
Well, I'm really happy to be back.
Let's, I guess, start with this. There's an awful lot of noise around the impact of the terrible and thoroughly racist gerrymandering we're seeing around the country. Can you help us understand what this means?
Well, I will give you a empirical understanding, but I do also have something I'd like to say in terms of democratic theory too. So don't let me forget. I think it's an important thing to mention. Look, if you're trying to track where the status of the gerrymandering is, let's start there. So last year we had gerrymanders sort of contesting gerrymanders in Texas and in California, which on net probably delivered the Republicans in Congress to between 1 and 2 seats. There was also gerrymandering in Virginia, which would have given the Democrats up to 4 additional seats in the House, but was struck down a week or 2 weeks ago. Time is a flat circle,
Yep.
Edwin. I can never really remember. And so we don't count those anymore. Democrats got lucky in a court case in Utah where they will pick up a seat because of partisan or because of other racial partisan gerrymandering concerns. The court is ordered to draw a new district, so Democrats get a bonus there. And then you, after that, have basically an avalanche of racial gerrymandering that has happened over the last 3 weeks. So let's recap that as well. First, you have in Florida, Republicans giving themselves an additional up to 4 seats by virtue of basically a combination partisan and racial gerrymander that they passed. And they passed their new map the day before the Supreme Court's Calais decision came down. This is the case 2 weeks ago that basically invalidates the Voting Rights Act or makes it effectively unenforceable. And some of those districts that the GOP drew were racial gerrymanders, and they were just hoping that the VRA would get struck down so they could get away with it. And hey, they were right? And then there's been a new map in Tennessee that dilutes the black voters in Memphis and takes away a Democratic district there. And we will see the same thing, dilution of black voters in Louisiana, Alabama, for sure, at least 2 seats from those 2 states combined, and potentially 1 more in South Carolina, maybe 1 in Georgia, depending on how aggressive the Republicans get there. So look, on net, you're adding all this up. Republicans are probably gaining between 6 and 8 or 9 seats in the U.S. House just by virtue of gerrymandering over the past year and a half.
Okay. Is that going to be enough?
That probably won't be enough for them to hold on to the House, if that's what you mean.
It is what I mean, but how many contested seats really are there in the country? Not that many.
There's about 35 contested congressional districts at this point, and that's accounting for all of this gerrymandering. In 2024, there were 40-something. Now there will be 30, mid-30-something. So we're talking about Republicans effectively stealing, between 6 and 9 of the 40 competitive seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, a fourth of them, which will meaningfully reduce the responsiveness of the federal legislature to the concerns of voters. It will put more voters in safe districts where they have no chance ever of really changing the partisan control of those districts. That of course is a real betrayal of democratic principles. But let me just explain your big question here, which is, can this gerrymandering basically ensure that Republicans hold on to the House? Probably not. Okay, probably not. So, three more numbers for you. I know this is a lot of numbers to open the show. Republicans had an edge of 3 seats in the House after the 2024 elections. Okay, so they had 220 seats. You need 218 for a majority, so 18, 19, 20. So that means they can only lose 3 seats, or they lose their majority. Now, they've given themselves an additional 6. But Edwin, the average loss of seats for the party in control of the White House and Congress during a midterm is closer to 25. And when you have a president at a 35% approval rating, that party typically loses close to 35 seats. So we are talking about a sort of building of an additional advantage that might matter in a contested, closely contested election like 2028. But in terms of the midterms, I'm still pretty confident Democrats are going to retain, or Democrats are going to be able to take that advantage, take that majority in November.
Well, that will come as a great relief because, as you know, there's a lot of noise that says the Republicans just stole the midterms. And I don't believe they have successfully stolen the midterms. They've certainly got.
They're definitely trying to, and that will be the large part of the point, right?
And this won't be the last thing they do either. Weirdly, some of these laws say you can change polling places and not tell people where the vote is. That also is, voter suppression.
Yeah, so the Tennessee law that redraws the district also gives, I believe this is what you're referring to, gives local officials license to move polling places and not disclose the moving of those locations, which does cause confusion. We saw in the Texas primary elections, lots of voters in Dallas were confused. They filed, for judicial relief because they were not notified that their polling location had changed, and they did not get that relief because the laws in Texas said they did not need to be notified. And yeah, that will cause thousands, tens of thousands of people to
lose their
give
franchise.
up voting.
Yep. This is in the so-called greatest democracy in the world. It's really amazing. You were going to talk political theory for a minute. You want me to remind you about that?
Well, I do like to step away from the numbers and mention, and sort of already said this in terms of the competitive districts. Gerrymandering is a form of cheating. There's really no justification for diluting votes to give yourself a partisan advantage. My worry here, not even in terms of the impacts on control of Congress, maybe Congress, going to the Republicans, even if Democrats win the popular vote. That's very likely. This happened in 2012. It's maybe even likely to happen now in 2028. The broader concern is that this partisan gerrymandering that the Supreme Court has now enabled will spread beyond the South to other Republican-held states outside the South and to Democratic states. And on both sides, voters will be significantly disenfranchised by being sorted into safe districts. And the government effectively at that point is not democratic, lowercase d democratic in any real meaningful sense of the word. So I like to say this because I don't want people to think we're losing sight of the fundamental democratic betrayal of all this gerrymandering just by focusing on the numbers. It is bad regardless of what it does to House control. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
So before we leave this conversation, at the end of this conversation, I want to come back to you and talk about some ways we can fight back against that. And that goes at like questions of proportional representation. We can talk about that at the end, because I think it's worth at least putting it out there. What do people think about all this gerrymandering? Do people dislike it, and do they blame one party more than the other for it?
I don't know about the partisan question. I mean, certainly the ground truth of the matter is that Republicans are more at blame. They appointed the Supreme Court justices who have enabled this, and they have historically gerrymandered more, both partisan and racially. If you do ask voters, do you support legislation for independent redistricting commissions for partisan fairness in districting, you will get close to 65% of Americans, at least in our polling, last year, it strengthened numbers. That's what we found in favor of that stuff. You can also frame the question differently. You can ask voters, even if these fairness reforms resulted in your party losing a couple of seats in Congress or being disadvantaged relative to where they are now, would you still support them? And a majority, 55, 60% of voters still told us they would support the fairness reform. So there are, on the other side of that, obviously on the 45%, a lot of voters who would rather have the partisan advantage. I imagine that number is going to go up as states continue to gerrymander themselves, and as the stakes of our politics rise ever higher. And that is concerning. But it is not the case that 90% of Americans would rather give up their franchise, their equal access to the franchise, for partisan advantage, even though that is obviously the case for our elected leaders.
Yeah. I asked that because I'm just trying to think of the impact that this has on the Senate races as one more issue to campaign on. What do the Senate election look like? I mean, it is closer than I ever thought it was.
So Democrats have
Carolina. I think we might get Ohio back. There's some really interesting things going on.
The Democrats have a really good shot of flipping North Carolina. Their popular governor there is running for on the Democratic side against a Republican nominee who's never really held meaningful elected office there before and is flawed in some ways.
I want to say Anderson Clayton is going to be on this same show. She's the head of the party, the Dems there, and she is a powerhouse.
That's a good guest. So Roy Cooper's leading by double digits in these polls. I doubt he will end up winning by double digits, but I've been wrong before. So that could happen. The point is, it's very likely he will win that seat. Democrats are also, in my opinion, likely to pick up the seat in Maine, which is currently held by Susan Collins. She has managed in the past to outrun the state's partisan lean. It's a Democratic state in presidential years. But I think she's lost a lot of that advantage with the state's voters over the last 6 years since the last time she ran. And it's a big midterm year now where Democrats are really activated to vote. And it is a state that leans, roughly 8 points to the Democrats already. So if she's losing some of those incumbency advantages that she's usually conferred, then that's a potentially likely pickup there. And then they're, somewhere between a long shot and a toss-up in Alaska, where ranked choice voting allows the state to escape its traditional red lean in presidential elections, and potentially winning Ohio, where they have some good recruitment. But Republicans have some decent recruitment there as well, and they will pour a lot of money into that race, not to lose it. So I think the control of the Senate's maybe a little bit less than a toss-up. The Democrats may be slight underdogs, but hey, to your point, that is not that was not the conventional wisdom about this race for Senate control a year ago.
I guess it depends on whether the election is framed as Democrats versus Republicans, in which case it's going to be very, very close. But if Democrats manage to frame this campaign any other way, like it's about Donald Trump, it's about ICE, it's about Iran, it's about inflation, it's about gas, it's about the ballroom. If they can manage to have the election on any of those grounds, the chances are better.
Well, Edwin, you've reminded me something as well, which is that there's an independent candidate in the campaigns in both Montana and Nebraska. And in the case of Nebraska's Senate race, this candidate, Dan Osborne, who ran in 2024 and came very close to unseating the incumbent senator there, Deb Fischer, the Republican. He's running again, and those polls look pretty competitive. And
I think the Democrat just dropped out to support him.
Which is what the Democratic Party needs to do in really red states like Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska is not anywhere close to being moderate. We're talking about crimson red states. The Democratic Party brand just doesn't work there anymore, not really because of any ideological reason, although that complicates things, but just socially. Like if you're a Democrat, you're not winning because the social identity there is so attached to the Republican Party or against the Democrats, really. It's a polarization thing. So running independent candidates there could give Democrats, it's not going to give them the majority if Dan Osborne wins Nebraska, but they might have a bipartisan ally for key legislation or for blocking any sort of reconciliation votes on For example, spending $1 billion to fortify a ballroom on the White House that no one voted for. So there's some, just in terms of reframing the midterms, reframing like that, Republican versus independent also helps. Just Donald Trump versus anti-government sentiment, right? Anti-system sentiment there is really on the Democrat side.
I should ask this. I think I know this. Donald Trump's popularity is not plateaued, has it?
Every time it looks like it has stopped going down, it will go down a little bit more. He's stuck around a 36.8% approval rating among U.S. adults in my average right now. He has never been lower than that number, but the number hasn't really moved all that much for about a month. But this was what the polls looked like. There was also a period of flat movement in the polls between January and February, and then the war in Iran started, and he lost 3 points. So you really can't predict where the polls are going to go with this guy, because you really can't predict what he's going to do.
I can predict what he's going to do. He's going to line his pockets. He's going to break the law and send people to court and tell them to lie in court. The stuff he's been doing I predict he's going to keep doing what he's been doing. I don't think we can expect him to change his stripes at this point.
Did you predict he was gonna bomb Iran though? That's more what I mean.
No.
If you could, we should get the Edwin Eisendrath prediction of what Donald Trump is going to do hooked into all of our models.
No, I did not predict that we would be dumb enough to go to confuse a target list with a strategy for war and turn the entire world against us, because the entire world needs that strait to be open, and he closed it.
Right.
And now he's begging everybody to bail him out. And he's in China begging Xi to bail him out.
Well, even worse, I think the reporting there is that he didn't even ask him for help in dealing with the Strait of Hormuz crisis and demanding it to be reopened. Just more to your point on the incompetency here in terms of dealing with the actual concern of the American citizen right now, which is about prices rather than about lining the pockets of his supporters or the people in the 2024 campaign, who, by the way, met him in Mar-a-Lago, in which he pledged the biggest payday for oil and gas exporters of all time. But I don't have to tell you that.
No, but it's good to remind everyone. So how is inflation polling? And I mean, I know they're doing their best to blame poor old Joe Biden for all of it, but people can't possibly believe that this is all Joe Biden.
No, they don't. And we do have some directly comparable numbers on this. So the pollster YouGov, in combination with the magazine The Economist, my former employer, asks Americans every week, do you support or oppose or do you approve or disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling the economy? At Joe Biden's low point, this number was -20s, right? So the difference between the percent of people who approve and disapprove was 20 percentage points. That was the all-time low for Joe Biden. And this number was, by the way, like the week that he dropped out of the presidential election because he had such a bad debate performance, which is going to factor into whether or not people approve of how he's handling something.
Yep.
So -20 is the benchmark. Donald Trump this week is at -24 on the economy. And if you ask Americans not how do you approve of the economy or how Trump is handling the economy, but how do you approve of how Donald Trump's handling prices in particular, he's at -44, which is an all-time low.
Has anybody ever
Economist YouGov tracking?
No, that sounds, I mean, I can't imagine a president ever being that low.
It's possible George W. Bush would have hit a number like this, but pollsters were not asking the prices question at that point, so I can't tell you yes or no. But either way, right? Donald Trump is at Great Recession level approval numbers on handling the economy.
Where was Jimmy Carter at the end of his term when the hostages were taken? I mean, this feels Jimmy Carter-y to me.
Yeah, I don't know on the top of my head what his approval rating overall was.
Well, it's because you're young. I lived through are Americans seeing, I mean, when you ask about Donald Trump, his approval rating's terrible on the economy, but there's so many areas where he's doing damage. Do they generally think he's the disaster that I think he is, or do they not? They just think like, I'm focused on prices.
My big meta theory here is that voters, to the extent they think about like the average person thinks about politics, which is not very often. Only about half of people in our polling say they watch the news or get news about politics from social media at any regular frequency. That person is experiencing politics through the lens of the economy, through economic conditions on the ground and or economic conditions that they have been expressed to these people by their social groups. Okay, their friends and their family, and maybe some people they follow on social media or whatever. In that, if you buy that, then Donald, and this is the political science sort of conventional wisdom about how voters make their decisions, the less informed ones, then Donald Trump's 2024 victory is a result of economic anxiety and Biden's inability to this inability is in scare quotes for listeners here, to handle inflation. There's not really much you could have done from the COVID-induced supply shock, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. But
and he did something about it, and
we won't relitigate.
Have an impact after he left. Yeah,
right. If that is our model for how their voters make decisions, and it seems right historically, and it seems right for Donald Trump's victory in 2024. Then stuff like $4.67 gas, which is what it is at the gas station around the corner for me here in Virginia, which is almost $2 more than it was, a year and a half ago. That is an extinction level event for a presidency, for a party's control of Congress, because that is such a negative signal, and voters who are experiencing that negative signal, about half of them really don't know anything about politics or the mechanisms of the oil market, and in any normal circumstance would just blame the president, deserve it or not. But this time you have a president who has been claiming credit for his war in Iran and saying that it's necessary, saying in television interviews this week that he doesn't think about the average American's financial situation at all. He's just thinking about preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon. And that is actually, that line from Trump is telling. They have no defense, so they're pivoting entirely away from, the economy will do well, or you need to endure some pain, which is what they were saying about the tariffs, to, our goal is preventing Iran from getting nukes. Please get on board with our goal. Please, really. It's so bad for them to have nukes. Forget about
which they don't have.
Your pocketbook.
All right. So Elliott, if you're thinking about how to campaign in this year, right? You have the half of the people who aren't paying much attention, and we need to tell them the economy's terrible, and here's why. The economy's terrible, and they don't care, right? But that half of the people also don't always show up. Then you have the other chunk of people who are paying a lot of attention, who words like ballroom matter to, grift matters to, Iran matters to these people, Epstein matters to these people. How do you balance the things you have to say to the people who are paying attention and the things to get the folks who aren't paying attention to show up?
Yeah, that is the question for the campaigners. How do we get these normie voters to render their disapproval of the president and of the current economic situation at the ballot box? Well, it doesn't help the president that he is on TV all the time taking credit for the policies that are now causing everyday harm, that he's making the job of the campaigners very easy in terms of their ability to make advertisements that they can put on YouTube or local television or Instagram Reels or whoever. I don't do any of this. I'm kind of a boomer in this case. I don't really watch any of that stuff, so I never really get advertised to. Maybe they take out radio ads, Edwin. I don't know. But there's so you can do outreach, and the president's making that job harder for himself. But there's also just a sort of typical dynamic in politics over the last decade, whereby people who tend to vote Democratic also tend to vote in midterm elections. They are more engaged on average.
Yep.
So those voters who are already more predisposed to viewing Donald Trump's actions as unpresidential, or they just disapprove of them for partisan reasons, are already more likely to show up. So they may render. So in other words, if you think of of the midterm elections as a product, both of like general economic anxiety affecting the average person who's not really paying attention, and Donald Trump specific anxiety among those people who are paying attention, there's this is a double-edged sword. There's really no way around the bad midterm verdict for the White House.
That's interesting. And I think if you're a Republican candidate running out in the country, you call the White House, you get Susie Wiles on the phone, you say, come on, this isn't helping us. What are we supposed to do about it? And she says, oh, I know, dear, but we can't tell Donald. We just can't tell him. Nobody can talk to him, because he'll be mad. So I think.
Yeah, I would love more reporting. Over the last decade, of how the White House is approaching giving Donald Trump his polling numbers, because he does talk about them. He will lie more when his polls are bad. I don't know if you've noticed this.
I've never had such good polling.
I have 100% approval rating around MAGA Republicans. Yeah, exactly. And he'll say that stuff more often when his numbers are worse. So I do think my theory is he's sort of reacting to them narcissistically in denying that. That those bad numbers exist.
Reacting narcissistically from our president. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I want to ask you a different kind of question. Normal people like me, polling is problematic in election season. We get horse race polling from now till the election, and it's confusing most of the time. But this year we have to add to it horse race polling about prediction markets. What's the deal with prediction markets and polling? Are they the same? Are they different? How are we supposed to think about all of that? Or should we just read, sign up and read your newsletter to help us keep it straight?
That's a good start. Thank you. Look, I would just really ignore the prediction markets. Let me tell you why. So you will hear arguments from the boosters of the prediction markets, which these days, by the way, the prediction markets are paying journalists to write stories about prediction markets. They are paying CNN to carry the prediction market data on a little ticker, the Chiron, on the bottom of the CNN page. So if someone's boosting prediction markets, there is a good chance that person has been paid by a prediction market and some sort of marketing contract, by the way. So you have to be really careful with the information you're observing, or you're taking in, you're ingesting. If you take in the scientific research on the prediction markets, you get a pretty wishy-washy conclusion as to their accuracy above and beyond what you will get from reading polling or reading the election forecasters from the likes of me, The Economist, et cetera. And that is over the last 10 years or so. Prediction markets have been slightly less accurate than election forecasters, except for in the 2024 election. In one case, and that is at the presidential level. In fact, at the House and the Senate level in 2024, researchers found from Columbia, from a friend of mine, Rajiv Sethi, and his team, that prediction markets were worse than the election forecasters at the House and the Senate level for 2024. So the real best track record year for the prediction markets, you will hear they beat the polls in 2024, but that is really only true at the presidential level in terms of the Electoral College. Our forecasts actually better predicted the winner of the popular vote, Donald Trump, in 2024 as well, better than the prediction markets. So there's a lot of misinformation and hyping going around on these prediction markets right now, and the actual research-driven track record of them is not great.
Help me understand this, though. If I were going to be placing a bet on a prediction market, I would want some data to inform how I make my prediction, how I make my bet.
Yeah, you would probably go to a website like mine and try to get some information.
That's exactly right. So I'm looking at polling data in order to place, my bet down on the prediction market. So it seems like it's as good as the polling, except all the error that comes from people like me who misread the polls to get into my prediction market.
Yeah. There's there are some election forecasters out there now who are using prediction markets as input into their models, and they're creating this weird
that's weird.
logical error. There's a weird feedback loop they're programming in there, because you are going to issue your forecast and everyone will read it and then update their bets, and then that will update your forecast. And in theory, you could end up in this sort of death spiral of updating if the updating is not not very rational. And speaking of the participants not being very rational, here's another big rub of these prediction markets is they're being sold to us. I believe some of the terminology from the vote for the prediction market, Kalshi, is like a news source of ground truth about the world's events. If that's the case, then why are they so inaccurate at stuff like predicting the Pope? And the answer is because it's all reliant on the knowledge of the people who are participating in the market. And there's an unfortunate, maybe colloquialism in the prediction market and also the stock market space about good, smart money and dumb money, where those people who are participating in your market bring some level of information to them. And in prediction markets, unfortunately, the general trend is to have a lot of dumb money bet about something.
Well, right. I mean, the prediction markets have not learned what the financial markets learned in 1929, right? After the incredible crash that led to the Great Depression, we put in place all kinds of things that made sure that companies have to give enormous they have to be transparent so that people who are investors they can look at K1s, they can look at all this data that these companies who are in these markets file. So you have data when you make your investments. But these prediction markets on politics don't have any of that. They are the reason why markets crashed in 1929, and the prediction markets are going to crash in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth just restating that they are unregulated in the sense that financial markets are regulated. These are not regulated financial products in the sense that if you bet in them, you can lose all of your money if the market goes down. They're not insured at all. But also, there's a lot of insider trading. People trying to.
Oh, you mean somebody from in the administration on whether a bomb's going to get dropped tomorrow? Yeah.
Yes, such as that. But also in the electoral case, there was a story in NPR, I believe, last week. Although again, time's flat circle. We don't really know what time it is anymore. Could have been months ago, of a congressional staffer betting on the market whether or not their campaign would win based on internal polling that they got. And they placed their bets before those polls were made public. This is definition of insider trading.
This staffer's name was Pete Rose. I can't,
Yeah, we don't know who it was. The NPR protected their sources, which is kind of them. Better people.
So it's good a grift is everywhere. I want to go back in the time we have and talk about the ways we get out of the map making trap. And I was in a legislative body once. I participated in map making. It is an ugly, ugly process, and it is always, even if you have the best intentions, there's politics in the map making process.
Right.
I mean, as you have maps, people are going to make them. But I mean, the ancient Greeks had, in Athens, for one of their assemblies, they picked everybody by lottery, right? They just they didn't even need districts. If you pick people by lottery, you get a random sample. You never have to draw a map. And by the way, then you don't have to worry about paying for campaigns. All of that goes away. That's not happening. But there are other paths we could take that would make map making less onerous. Do you want to? Have you thought about that? I mean, multi-member districts or proportional representation. These are ideas that are out there. They're being tested in some places, like Alaska. What do you think?
One of the other interesting things, just by the way, you jogged my memory about the government in Athens, is the chief magistrate was a different person every day.
Mm-hmm.
You were chosen by lottery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To be the president. It was changed every day. So you really didn't have probably a whole lot of institutional memory there, which is not good. Not a great way to do your presidency.
No, but you had an Ostracon, which if we had would be a great thing right now.
Yeah, there are some people working on that. I think I need to dig into my email inbox. I have some pitches from them. I get these pitches all the time now. Inbox is useless, Edwin. Look, there's the problem we have today. The big two in terms of districting: racial gerrymandering and partisan gerrymandering. These are both downstream of the fact that you draw districts at all. Because districts have to be drawn, voters are going to be sorted into those districts. And because voters today are sorted geographically, more Democrats in the cities, more Republicans in rural areas, more Black voters in the cities, more white voters in rural areas, it is inherently easy to divide those urban, clustered voters in the urban areas and dilute their votes with voters outside of those cities, and to dilute the votes of both Black voters and Democrats. But it's just easier to do, just inherently easy to do, even if you have a fair districting system to do that. And it begs the question, why do we have to draw the districts at all? Nothing in the Constitution stipulates electoral districts, geographic-based electoral districts for congressional elections. It just stipulates that there are elections and that members of the states will elect a certain number of Congress people in proportion to the population of those states. That's it. That's all it says. Historically, there have been other electoral systems in the United States for Congress. There have been multi-member districts where all the voters in a state held a statewide election, and those voters and its number of legislators were just assigned based on the results of that election. The way that these were done was not very fair historically. Those seats were not allocated proportionally, and so you got a lot of dominance again of Black Democrats in the South, or just Black voters in the South. They weren't Democrats at the time, by the white populations there. But there's a fairer system now. We have a fairer system now for doing something like that, and it's called proportional representation, where if you are, say, in Alabama and you are the Democratic Party and you win about 40% of the vote. I don't think people realize 40% of voters in Alabama are Democrats. It's a lot more than you would expect based on how people talk about Alabama. Democrats would then win 40% of Alabama's congressional districts, give or take. You can't really have 40% of an odd number, 7, for example. But you can get pretty close. And the idea is to change to an electoral system that doesn't have to draw districts and assigns those seats proportionally by party. And because the most important predictor of who you will vote for and whether or not the government will give you the policy that you want, that you favor, but the most important predictor of those two things is your party, it makes sense to have an electoral system that is structured around representing parties fairly.
Yeah, but people don't like political parties in America right now. So it's hard to tell people that and have them. So, you can have.
They don't like the parties they have right now, but I think they would like a party that actually represented and actually listened to them.
Yeah. And you can stand, and there are, we don't have to go into the weeds on this, but there are methods of proportional representation where people don't vote for a party, they vote for candidates who stand with parties. And then the ones who are the lead, the districts that provide the most votes are the ones whose candidates fill that percentage in the proportional representation. So there's a bit of still voting for a person in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are these experiments possible in the United States? And politically possible, given the numbers you've looked at.
Well, I think we are entering an era where demand for reform will be so high that what seemed impossible might seem impossible now is possible very soon.
Yeah.
Now, it takes some explanation, and I am not the most efficient messenger for proportional representation. Other people are working on the public communication of
right,
this
but I think
that
all
aren't
of us
so in the
have
numbers.
to start talking about these ideas so that they become possible.
I think over sustained conversation about a better electoral system, we will convince more people, and I've been trying to do that. But it's actually more about the general principle that the Constitution is made to be amended, and there's nothing in there that stipulates that we have this system now that is so easy to game, even if people aren't being nefarious, but for which the Supreme Court has granted the state the permission to be nefarious. There is a better future out there, and I think that is people want to hear that message, that optimistic message, and we already have so much shared ground about how how poor the current system of representation, how poorly it performs for the average person. So I think we can get there.
Yeah.
And legally it's possible. Legally it will take, the best political scientist on this, or at least most well known, is Lee Drutman. He thinks all it will take was one change to the 1967 Uniform Congressional Redistricting Act, or some such. I'm getting that wrong because I haven't had my second cup of coffee, Edwin.
It's because coffee's so expensive.
It's very easy. Yes, it's so expensive now. It's very easy to remove the current mandate that states have single member districts. It's just one congressional law.
I mean, so we have to have these discussions. I mean, the other possibility is doubling the size of the House. I mean, there are all kinds of things. You'd still have maps, but it would be more granular to people. So there are all kinds of things that are in the ether that will have to get sorted out. It's sort of like Supreme Court reform. Everybody knows we got to do it. We might as well just keep saying it and make it possible to get it done.
Yep. Electoral systems do not change overnight, and there's so much intense anger that I think we can channel that into productive reform for the system. I think I'm one of the more optimistic people about this. I've been on this hype train for proportional representation for 5 or 6 years, but we are at the best. We are at the best point. Every year there are more people out there who want proportional representation too.
All right. Well, that is going to be our last word. Just remind everybody, between the times that you come and talk to me, how they can find your stuff and be better informed.
Edwin, I spend almost no time on social media. The best place to find my work is at strengthinnumbers.news, all one word.
Yep. And it is a great place. So everybody go to Strength in Numbers, get to know Elliott's work. You're going to need it to get through the next few months. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me back and for the very, very, very nice introduction.
You bet. All right, don't go away.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, we're live. Come on in. It's Friday. It's the Democracy Stupid. I'm Edwin Eisendrath. My guest today is Aaron Parnas. I'm very lucky to be joined by him today. He is, what is he? He's like Walter Cronkite for Gen Z. He's an enormous number of young Americans trust him to bring him the news, which is an amazing thing. He's also a bit of an entrepreneur. He's here on Substack with us, but you can find him on a lot of things I'm not going to figure out. YouTube, TikTok, I don't know lots of things that I've never heard of. This is what a young man in America does with a law degree. So
yeah, it's so good to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm delighted you're here. Hey, so my audience is a bit older than yours. So can you describe what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of share the news in quick 60-second, 70-second sound bites. I mean, that's really just what I do. I mean, it's just the facts. I don't share really my opinion. I don't share analysis. It's just, here's what you're missing. And I do that 10, 15, 20 times a day, and then do some deeper dives on my Substack. That's kind of it. I mean, it's a more than a full-time job. It's like 2 or 3 full-time jobs, but that is what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit in that world. It's an enormous amount of work, in part because the fire hose of news is so enormous. Like, how do you decide? Every day there's far more stories than you can choose to share. How do you pick and choose?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, it's whatever I can explain in 5 minutes or less. I mean, if I can understand it quickly, then I'll cover it. I mean, there are plenty of stories that I just either can't fully grasp on my own, or I don't think will be able to be explained in under a minute. For example, I'm not going to explain, I don't know, the Middle East, the conflict between Israel and Gaza in 5 minutes. Like, I just can't. I mean, it spans decades, right? So it's like, there are stories that broad stories I don't touch as often just because I don't have the bandwidth.
You mean like the Cubs winning 10 in a row?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, but you focus on politics and political news.
For sure.
Yeah. So tell me about your No, before that, what are your news sources? Where do you get the news that you then share? Who do you trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. A lot of my work is directly from kind of the firsthand source, right? If a congressman tweets, I have, if you look at my house, it's like multiple screens in my office. One screen is a constant ticker of every single member of Congress and world leaders' social media profiles that I have notifications on. I have another screen that I was a lawyer first. I have access to all the legal documents. So I'm getting sent PACER documents, court cases across the country every day. Another screen is C-SPAN. I watch C-SPAN religiously, and as a byproduct, the press conferences on Capitol Hill, through Congress.gov every morning to see what legislation has been filed. That's a bulk of it right there, and it's directly the firsthand source. But then I do, for like more investigative pieces, trust places like ProPublica, trust some reporters at Wired, for example, that do really good deep dive investigative pieces.
That's good to know, and that's really interesting too. Tell me about your audience. I mean, I'm sure you hear from them. Like, who are they? What? I mean, I have kids your age, and they, they're feeling this frightening time and coping with the political news along with the economic and societal stresses is not easy.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a very difficult time for a lot of folks, and for me, it's even difficult for me. I mean, I'm numb to all of it at this point. Nothing affects me, unfortunately, anymore. I mean, very few things affect me.
Well, you became a dad recently. That's definitely impactful.
Yeah, it is. And reporting on things like the Epstein files now has like a whole different meaning now that I have a daughter, right? So it is a little different. But I will say this. I mean, I think there is a real sect of society. My audience actually spans ages, male, female, location. I mean, everywhere. It just depends on the platform. And I think the common denominator in all of it is people are just tired of kind of the hyperbole, tired of just the clickbait, and now AI is being used in news and all this stuff. People just want the news, and that's kind of what I'm trying to give them.
Well, right. I mean, they can still, well, I don't know, they can't go to CBS, but there are other places they can go for news, but they trust you.
Yeah, and I think the reason why is because of authenticity, right? Like, I think that there's an authentic nature to the way I deliver the news. Like the way I'm talking to you right now, I'm in a hoodie. Like when I interview members of Congress or world leaders, I'm in a hoodie. Like I'm just myself. And I think wherever I am, however I sound, I really, one of my mottos is like, perfect is the enemy of good. I don't strive to be perfect. I don't strive for perfection. And I think that authenticity factor is important. And when you're doing any content on social media.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when I was a young man, I was a Chicago alderman. And one of the old guard put his arm around me and he said, you have to be authentic. Like the only thing that matters really is being authentic. Yeah. And when you can fake that, you can do anything.
Exactly. In law school, it was also the same thing. It was like, authenticity is what gets you jobs, right? Authenticity is how you connect with other people. It's how I connected with the jury when I was in a courtroom. Authentic.
Yeah, it matters a lot. And nobody really can fake it. So it's,
correct.
Yep. So it is an issue with candidates, and you see it all over the country. This notion of authenticity, can they connect with their constituents, with their audience? But less and less that matters as we draw maps where they don't have to connect with their constituents. Do you do a lot of reporting on the gerrymandering war?
I do, yeah. Primarily from a legal sense, but for sure.
I mean, you and a lot of people in your audience, you've grown up in an era where every American was fully enfranchised. I grew up in a country where they weren't, because it wasn't until 1968 that all Americans were allowed to vote in a presidential election, for example, and congressional elections. So does the recent destruction of the Civil Rights Act weigh on young people the way it weighs on those of us who remember what the world was like before it?
Of course it does, especially Black and brown young Americans who are seeing their right to vote kind of getting stripped in real time. I think a lot of people, I mean, granted, I don't know that many people are experiencing the impacts of it today, right? Because you don't have an election today or tomorrow, but I think they will come November. I think they will in the next several years when they realize that the districts they're living in no longer is represented by people who look like them, right? And no longer the people that really are ingrained in the community. And so I think it will have a very stark impact on young Americans. It'll just take some time.
Yeah, I don't know if we have the time. Let's talk about this week's news. There's been tons of it. Like, what stood out to you this week that sort of grabbed you and said, I really have to talk about this story?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the big thing that I'm kind of covering right now is data centers. I am really fascinated with the rise, especially in recent months and recent years, the rise in data centers across the country. But these data centers, I mean, they're literally killing Americans, and they're killing Americans in many ways, in more ways than one. They're killing the environment that we live in, and the ecosystems that rely on that environment by using a high amount of energy, higher than anyone could have ever forecasted. They're killing Americans in, for example, Boxtown, Memphis, Tennessee, where there is a small community, civil community that has been around since the civil rights movement, majority Black, and it's literally has one of the highest asthma rates in the country because of a data center built by Elon Musk for XAI. It's literally killing Americans there, and it's killing Americans.
Stop for 1 second. That's because that particular one is powered by a bunch of gas turbines that he just plopped in there without getting any approval.
Exactly. And it's also, I mean, like, and it's killing Americans in terms of costs. Costs are going up because of data centers. It costs more to get energy and electricity in some places. In Northern Nevada, you may soon have a community in Tahoe without an electricity source because a utility company has to divert energy from homes to a data center. So it's a very serious kind of rise. I mean, I understand the need for AI and the need for data centers to compete with other countries like China. There is a need. But at what point does the need override public health? And that's a real question that people are having right now.
The ability to ask that question, the ability to have the power to ask and respond to that question is related to the thing we talked about before, because the folks in Boxtown are about to lose any political representation because of the gerrymandering. So there's a direct link between this, what you're studying with data centers and frankly with other industrial polluters and the powerlessness that's come when the Supreme Court and Congress is striking away your ability to represent yourself.
100%. 100%.
That's a tough story. And you're able to tell that story?
I'm working on it actually actively as we speak. So that's my next kind of big story that I'm putting out.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you are. It's a really important story to tell, Aaron. Really important.
Thank you.
Did you have any insights into anything you saw in China this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was an interesting kind of display. I think it's interesting. I think the Chinese president is at his weakest point in recent history as a leader of China, and yet projected more strength than an American president who's at his weakest point in his term. So I think you had two very kind of weak world leaders, even though leading two very strong countries, two weak world leaders who are not revered by their own people. One of which came out ahead, and that was, I think, the Chinese president. I think she looked stronger, like a real strong man on the world stage, whereas Trump kind of looked like the little brother in a way.
Well, certainly she looked like he was in favor of stability in a dangerous world, and no one would accuse Donald Trump of that.
No, not at all.
No. Now, you're, if I'm correct about this, first generation American or second, right? And you have roots in Ukraine. So, like, talk about the way that war has gone, and what it means to people here in the U.S., which I don't think we don't talk about that very much now.
Well, I think it's the first war that my generation was a part of, in the sense that it's the first war that Gen Z kind of grew up and was like, okay, there's a war happening somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. The Middle East and like Syria and all that, and the civil wars there, that never had the same impact as a full-scale invasion by Russia into a European country. So I think that was the first war that a lot of people kind of were in tune with. And I think for me, being that I am Ukrainian American, I have family still in Kiev, I think it hit home differently, just because I had a little cousin sleeping under a mattress while bombs rained overhead, and she was in a bathtub. And I had a family who almost were drafted into the Ukrainian armed forces because they were an able-bodied man, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely harder on me. But I also think, unfortunately, we're now 4+ years into this war. And it's a war that's a war of attrition. It's a war that in a lot of ways Ukraine is now actually kind of winning, but still Ukrainians are facing bombardment every day. And I think people forget that Russia is actively trying to kill as many Ukrainians as possible. Civilian, military doesn't matter. And the one thing I do agree with the president on right now is that you have thousands of people dying on both sides every single day, and it is a bloodbath. And unfortunately, if the aggressor just kind of lays down its arms and says, "Here's your territory that we took illegally," the war will be over.
Over in a second. Yeah. I mean, there's a big Ukrainian community here in Chicago where I am. Has been for a long time, and it's bigger now. And there's just some distress there that the story has been pushed aside. I mean, you're right. The Ukraine war was the first war that a lot of people knew, but it was Gaza that taught people what war is.
Sure.
And, and it could have been Bucha was uglier in some ways. So it's there's some frustration here that Americans have left the leadership of the defense of Europe to Europeans and to Ukrainians themselves.
100%.
Yeah. Yep. So where is what are the news stories that give you cheer, that give you, that say, hey, wait a minute, we're turning a corner. This path away from democracy isn't inevitable, and or there's stories that democracy can actually work for people.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the most recent one that I reported on yesterday. Was this high school in Watertown High School in Wisconsin. A group of kids, about 300 of them, walked out in the middle of class in protest of a conservative school board decision to ban them playing a song from the Stonewall Uprising, an LGBTQ plus song from the Stonewall Uprising during their spring concert for their Wind Symphony. And the students were saying, screw this, you're not going to control our speech. And they literally walked out and boycotted the classroom. So seeing videos like that showed me that, like, hey, there's still hope, and like the kids are still energized, and they still want more from their government. And so that's one recent story that I think gives me some hope.
The No Kings rallies before that, the protests in front of Tesla, and then more specifically what my good Chicagoans did and what the people of Minneapolis did when ICE was more visibly present. They're still here, but when they were doing their thing as armed thugs in our streets, that gave me hope. That said to me, this isn't a Democrat versus Republican moment. It is an all America versus sort of an occupying MAGA in the White House moment. And I wonder if you see things like that.
Well, I mean, I don't see things kind of red versus blue, and I really am careful not to say like, oh, what one politician is doing is wrong, or what one politician who you should not vote for.
Yeah, you're not editorializing. I am.
Yeah, I think for me, where I see the hope, rather, and not everything you just mentioned, whether it's No Kings or after ICE, whatever, in Minnesota, is the use of the First Amendment, right? I think this idea that we have a strong and powerful First Amendment is something that shouldn't just be torn down because we have an administration or a leader who wants to tear it down. And I see Americans every day using their First Amendment rights and making their voices heard. And that to me gives me hope. That to me is powerful. And I think that it doesn't matter what political side you are on, you should use your First Amendment rights, and you should exercise those rights, take to the streets, make your voice heard. That is what makes our country great.
It's certainly what saves it. Make it great. Yeah. So that's the First Amendment as it applies to you and me and people in the streets. There's something different going on with the legacy media, where the head of the FCC is sort of weaponized the government to go after the media's rights, whether it's going after Jimmy Kimmel or doing something very strange with ABC's television licenses for all of their O&Os. Do you think the attack on traditional media is has it contributed to the need for what you do?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not bought by any billionaire. No corporation controls what I put out or when I put it out or how I say things. So I do think so. I wouldn't say it's a need more so than my success and the success of independent media is a byproduct of what we're seeing from corporate media, right? Because of what we're seeing at CBS and the big Paramount merger and soon CNN, you have really good journalists fleeing these stations and starting their own media entities. You have independent media rising quickly because of it. And that trust factor that many people lack in mainstream media, they don't with folks like me. And so I do think it's more of a byproduct rather than a necessity. But as we continue down this path, it will become more and more of a necessity, I think, overall.
Yeah. A lot of people are worried about it. They're like, well, we don't have any unity in America because we don't have that era where there was just, three big people telling us the stories. And I get that. But again, when there were only, three major newscasts around the country, so many stories of Americans never got told. I mean,
For sure.
we didn't, Boxtown, nobody would have ever mentioned it in the old days of media. It didn't exist for most of America. So we didn't really get to know ourselves. Now, though, we're knowing ourselves, but there's an awful lot of crap in the news ecosystem.
No, 100%. And I think that it's why we need a strong media generally, whether independent or mainstream. It needs to be strong. A strong independent, a strong media protects the people.
And how do people get to sort between the truth tellers and the ones who don't have a different agenda?
Yeah, fact check yourself, I think, is important. I think one of the reasons I do this work in the first place is because media literacy, ethics, and civics aren't taught in all schools across the country to all kids. And so I think there's a real need for people to learn media literacy and learn what a first-hand source is, what a second-hand source is, where to get information. If I say something, just because I say something doesn't mean it's law. Right? Just because the president says something doesn't mean it's law. Go and research.
He doesn't know that, but yeah.
Right? And dig in a little bit yourself and use your resources around you to find out the truth and whether it's what I said is true or not. So I think it's important that people learn those tools.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a few of your broadcasts, and you don't say. You tell people where you're getting your sources.
For sure.
This is who said it. It's so the transparency is a big part of helping people sort through what's true and what's not true.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Are you worried at all that the government, for so much of media and reporting, but also for commerce in America, reporting from the federal government's been very important. Just the data that comes out of the government. And that data is everything from the weather to how many cattle are in Montana, to census data. Are you worried that the integrity of that is not going to be with us much longer?
I think the integrity is already gone in a lot of respects. I think that, and it's not because the data that's being put out is false. It's because the people don't trust the data, right? I think it's hard to trust the government putting out statistics regarding the labor market when we saw the president fire the person responsible for putting out labor statistics because he didn't like her or he didn't like the numbers she was putting out. Yeah. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I personally believe, is still putting out accurate numbers today, but that doesn't mean the average American should trust it blindly just because they're the Bureau of Labor Statistics when we saw what Trump did just 6 months ago. So I think, unfortunately, actions by the administration have reduced Americans' trust in government.
I think at every level. I think trust in state governments, trust in city governments, all of that is eroded because of what's going on in Washington.
100%. But I also will say this. I think if you polled Americans back as long as polling existed and asked them, do you trust your government? An overwhelming majority is going to say no. It doesn't matter who's the president, right? Like, the lack of trust in government isn't new. It's just been exacerbated by this administration.
Yeah, there are times when we like what the government does. During FDR's time, he had a lot of support for very big changes to the government that made life better, but that still people griped about it. I mean, George Washington wrote this wonderful letter that said, if I had known I'd be treated like a common pickpocket, I never would have run for a second term.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
100%. we like picking on our elected leaders. That's part of the birthright.
100%.
Yeah. And not every politician understands it or can take it.
No, they can't. A lot of them are thin-skinned.
Yeah. Have you? I mean, you didn't do this in a former administration, but I mean, this is a particularly, my words, not yours, repulsive cabinet to have to report on, because exhausting, right? And they're just, you have to, the reporting is complicated, and you do it because what they say and what reality is are not always, and a lot of reporters just report what people say, but that doesn't help now.
No, it doesn't help being a mouthpiece of the administration. It really doesn't.
Right? But that's a lot of what news is. I think if they say it, it's news.
Here's the thing. If you look at Twitter these days, you'll see about 30 reporters on a weekly basis saying, quote, I just spoke to the president and here's what the president said. I have the president's phone number. I can call him tomorrow if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that because I think it doesn't move the ball in any way, forward in any way.
Well, you're raising a point that has been true. I mean, it's particularly true now, but it's always been true that this thing called access journalism is a compromised sport.
100%. It has been for a long time.
Always
it definitely is these days.
Yeah. I mean, if you got to just go have lunch every day with Mitch McConnell in order to report on what the Republicans are doing, you're not going to be a fair reporter.
100%.
Yeah. That's why we got into the war in Iraq from reporting at the New York Times that was wrong for years because of that. Yeah. But I'm guessing that because you're doing so well, you're getting pitches
all the time.
Oh, Aaron, cover this, or so they want to drag you into that world. How do you say no, maintain the independence that's been so important for your brand, for the trust you built?
Just by saying no. I mean, it's really that simple. I think because of the brand that I built, I don't need to rely on anyone else. Like I could not take a single pitch from a single person and still be successful because of what we built. So it's really self-sustaining. I don't need any outside backers. It really is an amazing kind of business, and it's an amazing feat of independent media, I think.
Well, curiosity helps too. I mean, I get pitches all the time and I don't pay any attention to them because they're people like you that I want to talk to, that I'm curious about. And that's how, right? And curiosity turns out to be a better guide than the pitches that are in my inbox.
Oh, for sure. But I also for example, I'm reporting on the Ebola outbreak in East Africa today. Just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you're an Ebola expert. If you want to be If, for example, someone who studied Ebola and all this stuff wants to come on, that's a different story. But if you're an internal medicine doctor in Georgia, doesn't mean you can, what are you going to give me? You're going to give me just general, information?
Yeah, Ebola's bad. Check.
Correct. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, but there are, the good news is there are a lot of real experts out there who probably, if you called them and said, would you talk to me about this, would be delighted for the opportunity.
And I have.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yep. All right. Do you spend a lot of time interviewing politicians?
Too much time sometimes.
Too much time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it your sense? I'm just going to ask this way. People are saying a lot. Oh, Democrats never talk about what they want to do going forward. They're just always tearing down the administration. Outside of Washington, when I look at people running in states and cities around the country, that's not what I hear. And I want to know what you hear.
I think it depends on where you're listening, right? I mean, I think if you're listening on TV or even sometimes during my interviews, you may hear, okay, it's just kind of these platitudes and there's really not much substance behind them. Versus if you're listening to them at a town hall in a community where they're kind of forced to answer directly to their constituents. And I mean, I have maybe 8, 10, 15 minutes with a politician. Right? I don't have an hour and a half
that
I would in a town hall. So I think it's a little different. And I think I try to push as much as I can, but that's also why I say I interview too much sometimes, because I've gotten to the point where I don't need politicians to come on just to tell me Medicaid cuts are bad, right? I want them
No.
to come on. I want them to tell me what are they going to do about it, if they're doing anything about it. And so I become more selective about it. And I think that it all kind of, it just comes directly. I mean, it comes depending on where you're listening.
The people that you talk to, I think there's a general feeling that political map making is a fraud and a troublesome topic. We're now doing it in ways that people don't like, this gerrymandering thing. But the answer to it is complicated because somebody has to draw maps.
Yes.
Or maybe they don't. Is there conversation that you're part of about multi-member districts or proportional representation, the kinds of things that make map making less important?
That's a loaded question. I actually
That's
don't.
what hasn't happened yet, as you're saying. It's not out there, something you're
Yeah,
talking a lot
correct.
about yet. Okay. When I talk to scholars, they're beginning to talk about this a lot as ways to make the map making less, to take away the power to direct results by drawing maps.
Got
to
it.
make democracy work better. I mean, there's a sense that we're in this mess because our democracy hasn't worked as well as it could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, and what are the economic woes that you hear about most from your listeners? Is it like housing? Is it like the job prospects terrible?
Job prospects are awful, especially for young people. They can't get a job right now. It's very hard to find a job, a good paying job.
Mhm.
Housing costs are too expensive. Yeah, I mean, grocery costs are through the roof. People are paying more today than they were yesterday.
Yep.
Gas prices, obviously, right now. Every sector of the economy is more expensive today. It is harder to invest. It is harder to make money. It is harder to keep your money today.
Yeah. Electricity costs are going up 13% in Chicago next month.
Yeah, I mean, I'm paying more every month for electricity. It's kind of crazy here in DC too.
Yep. All right. So, but you're hopeful. You're raising a new family. That's all great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's tiring. I mean, the bags under my eyes speak for themselves, but yeah, it's exciting.
Get that part doesn't get better with age.
Botox.
Yeah, no. Aaron, thank you for your time. It's really interesting what you do. Tell people if they want to, if they're not already your supporters, tell them how they can catch your news.
Yeah, just go on the Parnas Perspective on Substack, aaronparnas.substack.com, and check it out.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Check Up on Health with Chris Whitting.
Drinking and driving among teenagers is on the decline, according to Pamela Hyde from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
There are several reasons. I think there has been a stricter enforcement of DWI laws, and to the extent that those laws are enforced, teens are going to get particularly included in that. There's also been an increased understanding about the negative consequences of underage drinking on the part of both parents and youth. I think parents are learning more that the way they model that issue is important for young people. There's also been an increased attention to the issue in the media and by government and community groups. So when we say to our youth that there's sort of a never drink and drive kind of assumption or culture, that is a very helpful way to begin to help young people understand that it's not good for them to do that, and it can actually hurt both themselves and their friends.
With Checkup on Health, I'm Chris Whitting.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter. Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. I'm thrilled to be joined again by Jonathan Larsen. He's a journalist, a TV news producer. He's had actually a fascinating career in news, and he is the author of, I think, 2 different Substack newsletters. We'll talk about those in a bit. Jonathan, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Ooh, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Hello?
That's better. Perfect. Well, I wanted to get your take on this crazy world we're in. I mean, can I just start with the journalism, this thing that's in your blood. I mean, you helped create Chris Hayes' show on MS Now. You helmed the Village Voice.
The weekend show, his old show, not his current
His old show, right. And the Village Voice, you kept it going, and you have Time Magazine.
That was a different Jonathan Larsen, actually.
Oh.
Another Jonathan Larsen, spelled S-O-N. He's a good deal older than I am, and he actually is the star of a funny, although also enraging story where when I was a young journalist and he was editor of the Village Voice, I applied for a job there, and he had me come in for an interview, not to give me a job, but just because he was amused that we had the same name.
That's so rude. That is just rude.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
No, that is for a young person looking for a job, that really is not acceptable behavior. Yeah, I mean, really, that's not fair.
Well, the payoff
I know the country standard is low, but that's not okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so I apologize for that, but tell me, like, what's your take on how this massive amount of real news gets into the American consciousness in time to make a difference?
Yeah, so my sense is that it's not necessarily coming from traditional sources of news, right? We're seeing sort of a shattering of that. All the network newscasts, which used to be sort of the secular altar, right, which the country would come around every night after work and sort of check in and say and learn, here's what's going on at the moment. And by the way, I think it's worth noting that those, the good old days was often very bad journalism. It was, lots of people were not being heard from. But I think what we have today is, I understand why a lot of people are concerned about the fracturing of journalism. But I think we're in a transitional period to something I would argue and hope is better, even if it is more dispersed, right, throughout the information ecosphere. And yes, there are more and more bubbles to confirm your bias, whatever your bias might be. But I also think that there's a limited shelf life for that kind of thing. And I think all but the most sort of retrograde brains eventually are going to insist on sources of information that are willing to entertain ideas that they might not agree with, right? Because eventually I think the human brain becomes a little bit suspicious when the person they're hearing from year after year after year is constantly just blowing smoke up their butt. Their predictions are not coming true. Their observations and claims don't match what they're seeing on the ground in their own lives. So my hope is that we're seeing the creation, whether it's on Substack and lots of other platforms, of maybe dispersed journalism where it's not quite as generalist as the evening news used to be, but more like specialist journalism. So if you're interested in healthcare, you go to industry healthcare sources, or abortion, you go to Abortion Every Day, that kind of thing. So I'm hopeful.
I guess I am too. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into philosophy here, but American pragmatists after the Civil War began to define truth as what's useful to know. If it is unhelpful, you can't judge it to be true. And I guess we're going to find out people have bought into some very dishonest media for a long time, and they're finding that I believed my gas prices were going down. I believed I'd be safer in the world. I believed that wars would end, and all of that's proving not to be true. And it makes it hard to believe those news sources anymore.
I think that's right, and we're seeing that, right? We're seeing Charlie Kirk's media empire. Every time I go on the Drudge Report, which yes, I'm the one person who still checks every once in a while. They've got another article that they're linking to about Charlie Kirk's empire disappearing, and in that case, that's largely tied to his affiliation with Netanyahu and Israel. And as that cause loses currency among MAGA and among the right, then so will that media outlet. And I think ideally, I hope that people will go to sources that aren't so wedded to certainty. This is something I try to talk about in the Substack that I can't name on your air. That's something I try to talk about is, it's really important. We saw this after the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. Instantly, people on the left, the supposed reality-based community, they were absolutely sure it was staged, it was a setup, it was a false flag, whatever. And I was shouting into the wind, like, you have no evidence for this whatsoever, and I do think that ultimately people will gravitate towards sources that are willing to be uncertain about things and explain why. I think peeling back the curtain a little bit on the sort of epistemological process, right? The systems that guide what we report and what we say, if we share the thinking a little bit, then it becomes a little bit more accessible for people and okay for them to be okay with uncertainty. So I think the mission of successful journalism is going to be much broader and maybe in some senses fill gaps that maybe educationally we're not filling as much anymore, or socially or civically. But again, this is my hope, and I have been disappointed.
But reality is a hard thing to ignore. I mean, CBS's ratings have crashed and continue to crash as it abandons fact, sort of I don't know if you. I don't know if there's a continuum, but if they raise the ideological at the expense of the fact-based work, they're shedding audience, and that's interesting, and that's hopeful for me.
Yeah, it would be nice to know. Certainly, I'm aware of that. It would be nice to know where they're losing audience. Right? Are they losing people who were Dan Rather fans 20 years ago, or are they losing MAGA people because they're not fulfilling the MAGA dream? The interesting thing about CBS right now is that they're actually still doing a lot of adversarial journalism. I see it on their website. They were the ones, I think, who first reported, for instance, about the bunker where 6 or 7 service members were killed in Kuwait not being reinforced on the roof. That came from CBS News breaking that story. Whether that made it on their air that night, I do not know. But I do, it would be interesting. But also these entities are all shedding viewers for the most part anyway. I think ABC and NBC might have seen increases year over year, I just read the other day. But generally speaking, all of these sort of old legacy familiar outlets and platforms are losing eyeballs. They just are, in some respects, regardless of how ideological the content is. And I'll just throw in before I shut up, for all the valid, really important criticisms of Barry Weiss, at least she's trying to do something differently. Now, I would hope that you would change course once you see valid arguments why it's a bad idea, and once you see the numbers. But what to me is mind-boggling, and this was true when I was on the inside of this industry, and it's true now, is the absolute disinterest in doing things even a little bit differently. And even when that's been the case on their air, when I did Chris Hayes' first show, it broke a lot of rules about what you're supposed to be able to get away with on TV in terms of, that's too boring or whatever. Well, that might be, but, the ratings actually went up and we got critical acclaim and all of this stuff. The problem is, and I make the example I use most of the time is Rachel Maddow's show. The driving ethos of TV news is keep it short, keep it simple. And yet on MS Now, the top-rated segment every week is her Monday Night A Block, which is the most complicated, longest segment that the network airs.
Sure, and I'm going to push back a little bit there, Jonathan, because because she's just remarkably good at telling those stories.
That's my
It's hard
point.
to,
That's my
it's not
point.
like it's repeatable. She's just really very, very good at it.
Yes, that's my point, though, is that the reason you don't see more of that is, like, if the question is, why don't they do that? The answer is, and this should be horrifying to people, because they can't.
Right. It's really hard.
I've worked with, it's really hard, and you have to, it takes a lot of discipline, and Rachel violates a lot of the norms of TV news. That takes discipline and a certain amount of sand to do as well. And, I've seen lots of people in the industry who could step up and do really good, sharp, needle-moving work. And I've seen and been one of the people, those same people who, in a show that has bad systems and people not interested in excelling and breaking molds, they'll do bad, boring, run-of-the-mill work too. I've done it, and lots of good people have. So it's a combination. It's not enough to have good people. You also have to have, if not institutionally, then with the leader like a Rachel Maddow or a Keith Olbermann, for whom I worked for a long time, willing to do those things, willing to break those norms.
Yeah, I mean that's how progress gets made, for sure. I mean, all these things all these norms that we're used to were new once too. It's just been a while. Yeah,
and they're not necessarily good norms, or even a lot of them are vestigial, and people don't even think about them. Right? The example I give a lot is how anchors will tell you with ferocity in their eyes and voice how objective they are, but if you as a guest come on and talk over the anchor or make them miss a commercial toss, they'll get mad at you and they'll say you shouldn't have done that. Like that, they're willing to have an opinion on cutting for an aid that kills hundreds of thousands of people. I got to stay impartial on this one, guys, and people can see that you're more interested, or at least more invested in, the norms of just cranking out the donuts than in the decisions and the politics and policy that affect or end people's lives.
Yeah, I think anymore that's, I think the contemporary audiences can't stand that. Can't stand it.
Yeah, I think, which is why they're smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that's the news. Meanwhile, covered or not, all over America today, there are these gatherings as people struggle with the reality that in this democracy that we live in, voting is no longer a right that our courts fully protect anymore. I mean, they said it can be mapped, or its meaning can be mapped away. You can be mapped into a place where your vote doesn't matter. But they also, like in Tennessee and in Texas, you can change polling places without notifying people. So you show up to vote and there's no place to vote. This is, I think, one of the biggest stories, not just of the week, but of like the half century. I mean, it's a complete reversal of the arc of the country for at least since 1965. And I don't know that it's getting it's getting a kind of attention, but the attention is like, what does it mean for September? It's not really deep enough. What do you think?
I have a fairly contrary, I should start off by saying, I agree with you that the anti-democratic movement that we're seeing is sort of epochal in terms of its implications. But I do push back on a few things, not that you said, but just generally what's out there. One is
I'm happy to have you push back on me too.
No, I know. I just want to be clear that these words did not come out of your mouth. But this predates Trump. This is in the DNA of the modern, by which I mean the last 40, 50 years, Republican Party.
I
the
agree.
Judges voting for this have been appointed by presidents of the last half century. So a huge danger, I think, is to ascribe this to Trump. He's making good on things that previous presidents and their judicial nominees have tried and are now facilitating. So let's not pretend anything about that. The other thing I would say is that there's I think, growing awareness. There was a piece in the New York Times that I wrote about in my unsayable Substack that really neatly offered some history. It was Carl Holst, I think, wrote this piece about how the part of the way that Democrats lost the South, electorally speaking, was that in the wake of Voting Rights Act amendments and new legislation, Democrats carved out districts that were majority minority to ensure proportionate representation by Black politicians, not just Democrats, Black politicians. And obviously, an absolutely noble, worthwhile, obligatory cause. I'm not talking about the outcomes here. I'm talking about the tactics. There were Black politicians at the time, I believe John Lewis was one of them, who were worried that these maps were going to fracture the voting alliance between white progressives and Black voters. And sure enough, within a decade, it did. And you had you had more Black representatives, but then what happened was all the other districts, bereft of those alliances, they fell to the Republicans, and you ended up with Newt Gingrich as Speaker of the House as of 1994 or 92. I don't remember which one now. And so now there's actually the potential. This is something I've been writing about, but not only me. There's the potential for a boomerang effect here, which is that in the Republican gerrymandering, what they are doing consciously is diluting their strength, right? They're thinking, oh, you know what? We could grab that district if I push just a few of these Republican voters into that district. And they might be right, but it's also possible that the anti-Trump sentiment is so powerful and so widespread that previous non-voters are going to turn out. Certainly previous non-midterm voters may turn out. And if that happens in great enough numbers, that Republican district that pushed some Republicans out might, in theory, lose both of those districts.
Yeah.
They might actually end up hurting themselves. Dummy mandering, they're calling it.
Yeah. Well, you've said three things there that I agree with. This anti-democratic effort is Lewis Powell's on the court side. That's 1970s. It's Kevin Phillips in the. We have to just make sure that the biggest. What did Kevin Phillips say? The party will win forever that contains the biggest group of animosities towards others. So, right. So those can then, and those come out of the 1970s and are partly in reaction to civil rights. Right now we're seeing the anti-democratic urge tied to a racist one. And I just want to lay that out and call it what it is. It's the gleefulness with which libraries are getting rid of Roots, Alex Haley's book, or saying, or saying you can't have the biography of Jackie Robinson. And by the way, your districts are the ones we're coming after. This is not
anti-diversity efforts throughout the entire federal government and some state governments. Absolutely.
Yes. You get sued if you hire a Black person today. You have to prove that somehow you didn't disenfranchise some white person. I mean, this is wrong and so fundamentally, and now they're tied together, these two efforts. But your point about packing and cracking, the way we drew those supermajority districts, is of course absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons why Republicans supported the Voting Rights Act for as long as they did, because they benefited from this. And the packing was as bad as the cracking, and packing everybody into a supermajority district had some terrible side effects. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But your last point was proven in Hungary just a few weeks ago. Landslides overwhelm gerrymanders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Landslides overwhelm them, and then they end up backfiring. And that is that is my great hope. But I don't believe this crowd is done trying to find ways to hedge the elections. Gerrymandering is, what they're doing now. The election isn't for a few more months, and they're not going to stop. So we'll see what else they have in mind.
Yeah, and as you said, at the beginning of this topic, this is just one of the methods they've talked about. Now, I'm actually gratified that they haven't done as much as they could, not legally, but logistically. There's a lot that Trump could have done to undo this. And actually, there's a lot of. In fact, I have a piece that is in my head to write about Jared Polis pardoning or granting clemency to Tina Peters, the Colorado.
What do you think about that?
Well, it gets probably a little too complicated here, but
first tell everybody. Wait, stop. I'm going to interrupt you long enough. We need to give everybody background. Tina Peters was convicted of election fraud. She's a Republican who let people at the voting machines, and she was convicted in Colorado and went to jail. Right. And then the president and everybody else said, I'm not giving Colorado any money unless they get this political prisoner out of jail. And now the governor has commuted her sentence. Is that fair? Is that a fair summary?
And I think she actually let people access it after the vote in the pursuit of proof, but it's sort of immaterial. Yes. And the other thing I would throw in is Trump issued, as far as I'm aware, the first in history presidential pardon of a non-federal crime where he had no jurisdiction to do so. But the thing I'm going to get at in the story that I'm hoping I can get out tomorrow is what people largely missed at the time was that there was a letter sent by Peters' attorney to Trump that made the case for clemency for her. That was very unreported on. But the underlying elements of the argument were basically this Venezuela stole the election conspiracy theory, which is actually something I've been reporting on for more than a year now, which has had, and again, I don't want to get too far into the rabbit hole here, but it's had an insidious effect on Tulsi Gabbard, Mark Wayne Mullen. I've reported on all of these folks and their involvement in this at jonathanlarsen.substack.com, SEN, so you don't get the Village Voice guy. But these guys had an in, and they're the same, not Mullen and Gabbard, but the two people I'm talking about are a former CIA guy and a Venezuelan expat. And they've been feeding info to the Trump team not only since before the inauguration, but they were also involved in bringing forward the Venezuelan witness, almost instantly discredited, that Sidney Powell trotted out in 2020 as the Kraken. Remember, released the Kraken.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, so these two guys that I was talking about, they have a long history of connections and of feeding what you could arguably say is misinformation about Venezuela and other countries being involved in these quote-unquote conspiracies that then gets used as rationales for things like deploying the Alien Enemies Act or justifying blowing up boats in the water. You know, they're providing the cherries that are getting cherry-picked for these, absolutely unfounded legal claims and claims to authority and power that the president is only supposed to have in emergencies.
Bring that back to Governor Polis and this clemency.
All of that was part of the letter that the lawyer sent to Trump, making the case for why Peters should be granted clemency. And by the way, just to get things even more complicated, it also is going to tie into the ultimate trial of Nicolas Maduro, because the information against Nicolas Maduro also comes from these same conspiratorial quarters. And I realize the irony here, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners think I'm being conspiratorial here, but I will point out that other national security reporters have confirmed what I've written. The Guardian has picked up on it. So it's this sort of underreported undercurrent behind the entire Venezuela dynamic, and some on the right are even claiming that the guys are the reason that Trump raided Venezuela and got Maduro in the first place as payback for 2020. And now Peters is a part of that. And
so I don't know. So why did the
John,
governor, who is apparently not a conspiracy theorist, why did he give her clemency? He says because, she was sentenced for too long. But I'm not happy about that.
Yeah, I think someone made, I think it might have been Chris Hayes actually, about asking for, are there comparable stats on people who are giving clemency? And also the most important thing I would say is that just as we've seen with Trump and his pardons, there are actual look-upable, findable on the internetable standards. There are processes you are supposed to go through. You are supposed to atone. You are supposed to make amends. You are supposed to provide remuneration where appropriate. You're supposed to do all of the things that a truly penitent person would do, and that does not seem to have been the case.
It does not appear to be the case. Yeah, Jonathan, I have two other topics I really wanted to talk to you about, including J.D. Vance's leadership of the so-called fraud project. But you and I are out of time, so we need to do this again. Would you? And I apologize for my introduction. I won't make that mistake ever again. But will you tell people how they can find both of your Substacks?
Sure. I do investigative reporting at jonathanlarsen.substack.com. And every weekday morning, I have an irreverent newsletter, the name of which I can't say on your air, but it's basically
you can say
effing news.
Yeah.
Yeah, the effing news, except it's actually spelled out, the effingnews.substack.com. All of my work is free. You don't have to pay to subscribe to read any of it. That's sort of the goal, is that we get enough paid subscribers that we can make this work free for everyone, because information should be free. So thank you very much for having me on and for the opportunity to let folks know about
thank you again, and thank you for your work. And for those of you who are listening, Jonathan is a really fabulous writer. So you read his stuff. It is fun to read. It is clear as can be, and worth your time. So please go find him on Substack. Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, everybody, we're going to break for the news, and then I'm joined by Yusef Jackson, the new head of the Rainbow Push Coalition. He can talk a little bit about what went on there this morning, even though we recorded it earlier. I think you'll like it.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, I got a treat for you. Yusef Jackson leads the Rainbow Push Coalition, the organization founded by his father, my friend, the Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson. Back in the 1990s, when he was a young man, Yusef was my lawyer in a tech venture. He went on to a career in business and investing, but he never strayed far from the mission to lift people up. And now, boy, does he have his hands full. Yusef, welcome.
Edwin, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank you for having me on the show. It's good to hear your voice again, and I enjoyed that opportunity we had to work together. I thought we were doing some groundbreaking work in education. And you're right. I think neither one of us have veered far from the commitment to serve people, whether that's in business or directly in civil rights or human rights, as I'm doing now. But I think that that has always undergirded what we do, and I don't think there's any problem with being able to do both. I think this is a time where people are able to explore all parts of their personalities in their lives and their work, and then in the grand scheme of what they do, I think you've got to treat people well, and at the same time, Edwin, work to make America a better place for more people.
Hey, I want to talk about that work, but before we get to it, you're not yet as well known to the general public as other members of your family. You want to take a minute and introduce yourself and your journey?
Yeah, I'll do that. I first want to just take a moment to pause. This is we're a few months after my father passed, Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, Sr., and I want to thank your listeners. I want to thank the public for the kindness that they showed my family during this moment, these moments of bereavement for us. The prayers they've offered, the Instagram videos, the memes, the messages, we've had an outpouring of kindness from people and from the media. And it would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for that. It was an overwhelming celebration of life for him that I think was fitting of a guy of his stature. And I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for the kindness that you showed our family. You may have had differences of opinion with the way sometimes he carried out his work, but by and large, you knew that his mission was to make America better. So thank you very much for your kindness to us. Yeah, this is interesting. I'm honored to be president and CEO of the Rainbow Push Coalition. It's work that I have been preparing for all my life, and it's sacred work because it's the work of serving people. I think all the Jacksons have been trained to serve people. It's interesting. We were a well-known family growing up, but we weren't a rich family growing up. We had enough to eat, but we didn't have tremendous excesses. Our parents worked really hard to give us the best education possible. Our father always said, I may not leave you with much, but I want to leave you with a good name and a great education. And by and large, he did that. And so I think that's the fundamental principle that guides all of the Jackson children and kind of what we do. The other thing is, when I was raised, because of the work that my father did and his time on the road, my mother's international work on the road, we were raised by a community of people who spent, at some levels, more time with my family and my brothers and sisters than they did with their own. I recall Esther Thompson taking the bus from Blue Island and Robbins, and she lived in Blue Island and she lived in Robbins, to babysit for us. We had a lot of people from the neighborhood of Inglewood, from the west side of Chicago, from the south suburbs, who came to take care of us when our parents would travel. And they took public transportation to get to us. They got there on the Super Transfer, on the CTA. And when you're raised by that working class person, you inherit their working class values. And I'm always indebted to those who gave us that kind of time in their life. And so I wanted always with my life to be able to be in a position to give back. I can't accept what they gave us out of the goodness of their heart without making much money for doing it, and then just spend my life to enjoy the excesses of what the earth has to offer. So I'm honored to be here. In many ways, giving back is very personal to me.
Thank you for that. And that is that's like, a lot of people talk about themselves on the radio. They introduce themselves, but they're not often that authentic. I love that. That was great, Yusef. That was really great.
Well, I thank you. I mean, obviously, I practice law. I'm a lawyer. Went to University of Virginia School of Law, and then I came out, and my idea was to do a couple years of law and a couple years of banking, then buy a business. I never made it back to the bank, but I was in the beer distribution business for a long time. Always served on the board of the Rainbow Push Coalition, my father's organization. So we always traveled together, learning and doing human rights and civil rights work around the world. And then as my father began to exhibit the symptoms of his progressive supranuclear palsy, I got closer to him and closer to the work. I was at one level spoiled by the fact that I have a father who, carried a big umbrella. And then my brothers had done such great work, Jesse in Congress and Jonathan in business and now in Congress. My sister is a media personality on her own right. So I was able to really carve my path in business, and I didn't have to be in the front. I could be behind the scenes. It's an administrative role that I really enjoyed playing for my entire family. I organized things pretty well for them, but now I'm out front, and that's fine. I've always been prepared for that, and I think every Jackson has been prepared for that. But when my father got sick, I was honored to step in and support him in a more aggressive, forward-facing role. I will say the reason I'm privileged, Edwin, if I can hop right into it, is I was born in 1970. I'm the first generation of African-American people born fully legally enfranchised. with citizenship and the right to vote. Pre-1964, 1965, African Americans were not considered full citizens, and nor did they have the opportunity right to vote. So my brother Jesse, my sister Santita weren't born fully enfranchised legally. Many women were not born legally enfranchised. We think about what the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act did to the country. Let's step back a little bit. The Constitution, when it was written and passed, applied citizenship to basically 6% of the country. The whitest, richest male land-owning people were those who could vote. And from that 6% of the country, through the work of the Civil War and the expansion of African-American opportunity, and then obviously the clapback of Jim Crow, but then really the work of the Civil Rights Act and the work of the Voting Rights Act, that expanded the Constitution, due process, equal protection under the law from the 14th Amendment, expanded it to the whole rest of the country. Every single woman, every single African-American, every single Native American, every single, it made immigration more fair, not just Western European, from 1965 forward. So when you think about the advocates of the civil rights work and their crowning achievements in the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act, you could call that A. Philip Randolph, you can call it John Lewis, you can call it Andy Young, Jesse Jackson, you can call it Dr. King, obviously. They're the advocates of the work, along with their coalitions of Jewish Americans and labor Americans and teachers. And so it was a broad-based coalition, but relatively narrow, that was able to secure that legislation. But the beneficiaries of the civil rights legislation, they're the ones, I believe, who owe a debt of service and gratitude to continue the expansion of democracy to more people. I think most white women, when they walk around in Chicago today, do not see themselves as beneficiaries of the Civil Rights Act. They do not see themselves as beneficiaries of the Voting Rights Act. And I think that's fundamentally a miseducation. You're absolutely, obviously, from women's suffrage to 1919, you are a beneficiary of that. But because of the application of the vote, women still had to pay poll taxes. They were still subject to household rules. They were still subject to pink jobs, and they were still legally sexist. It was legal to be sexist. It was legal to be racist up until 1964, 1965. And so I think when more people realize what the magnitude of the benefit of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act did for the country, they'll see themselves as civil rights and voting rights advocates, not just beneficiaries.
Yeah, I thank you for doing that. I mean, the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act made real not just the post-Civil War amendments, but the 19th Amendment as well. They were really important for all of those, for the 15th Amendment, particularly, and the 19th Amendment. So I'm glad you brought that up. But I feel like the whole country has benefited from these laws and the outcome of much of that civil rights movement. I mean, I just think of, one of the leading doctors who helped find the vaccine for COVID, was a person of color. I mean, for gosh sakes, if you take a giant chunk of the population and say you can't contribute fully to the nation you live in, everyone is poorer. Everyone loses. I mean, the idea that we would live in a country where we would say, you know what, this giant group of people exists only to be exploited, not to contribute to the nation we all live in, is one of the dumbest pieces of our heritage. And it's raising its head. I mean, you've taken the leadership of Rainbow Push Coalition in a terribly fraught moment, I'm afraid.
True, and it's been an expensive thing for our country. I'll explain that. If we were to fully enfranchise African Americans and Hispanics, that's a $10 trillion increase to GDP over the next 5 years. By 2031, $10 trillion is added to the GDP if we simply see African Americans and Hispanics as trading partners rather than partners to be exploited. If we were worth dollar for dollar in the workforce, if we had the same life expectancy, if we had the same, if our first housing purchases were at the same level as, average to the mean of white people, that's $10 trillion. I think that means we're worth investing in right here. You don't have to go all over God's green earth to find investments when we can invest in people right here in America and make America better. If you think about this, every woman athlete right now, I'm on the board of the athletic department at the University of Virginia, and I know how tight the economics can be. There were no women athletics without the Civil Rights Act, really. Colleges would not be supporting women's athletics dollar for dollar on par with men's athletics if they didn't have to, because they're by and large not revenue sports. If you look at the acceptances, there are a few spots in higher education institutions designated for women. All that changed with the Civil Rights Act. Mm-hmm. It just literally enfranchised the whole country. If you think about bilingual ballots, early voting, ballot access, all that is Voting Rights Act. That stuff has been gutted now, so it puts pressure both on the cities and in the suburbs. So, if you have a blind brother or sister and the state passes a law that you can't assist someone with a ballot, right, then you disadvantage my brother or my sister. Yep. Because you're worried about voter fraud. That's just fundamentally unfair. And it's a trick. It's a trick design, and your math is better than mine, always has been. It's a regression to the mean. And a regression to the mean simply means if variable 1 is far outside the average, variable 2 is probably going to be closer down to the average. So the mean of our country has been a racist, sexist country. But there was language put into it by, I believe, some really smart people that said we're all created equal, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we have a Bill of Rights. I think those were opportunities for the country to latch on to equal opportunities for everybody. But if we regress to the mean, the general sphere of our country has been that racist, male-dominated orientation. And then there have been periods of time in history where you offered more to white working people, where there was enfranchisement of the African-American male through the 15th Amendment. Then there was enfranchisement somewhat of women with the 19th Amendment. And then there was massive enfranchisement in 1964 and 1965. But at each one of those, there's been massive pushback to try to regress somewhat to that. Now it's growing. It's not 6%, obviously, to that growing mean. But that's the gravitational pull we have. It's back to the original framers, right? It's let's be originalists. Well, the originalists, you see where that is. But the Dr. King democracy is different than the original democracy that we have, and that's the one that we're fighting for.
Yeah, I mean, we're a conflicted nation. We always have been. We've had competing strains of thought about who we are and what kind of a future we want to have. But one has dominated almost all of my life, and the current crowd has come in to try and erase it. I mean, I want to be clear. What we're talking about is the media isn't helping. It talks about what the Supreme Court did in terms of what it will mean for the next midterms. But my God, the Philadelphia Inquirer's fabulous columnist Will Bunch wrote a piece this morning about a section of Louisiana where because of disenfranchising black voters, it's been pretty easy to cite chemical plants. So those plants are all there. They aren't hiring the people who live around them, but cancer rates around them are really high. So if you don't have any political power, you cannot protect communities from massive and deadly exploitation. And that shouldn't give anyone comfort.
Oh, my goodness. You have pinned the tail on the donkey. The Civil Rights Act is really about, the Voting Rights Act, both really. It's really about power share. Right now we have 154 some odd women who serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. That's power share. They think about law differently than the men do. There's 62 African Americans in the House of U.S. Representatives. That's power share. And so what we're finding is that there are people who want to reduce the power share. Louisiana is a great example. 33% of Louisiana is African American. There are 6 seats in the House of Representatives. There's one fellow, Cleo Fields. It's fair to say he was speaking at our Rainbow Push Coalition meeting earlier today. Cleo Fields, along with Speaker Welch, to talk about the state impact of this Calais decision. versus the federal impact, which Cleo talked about this morning. But it's a power share thing. And so what you have there is if they write him out for the second time, by the way, in 25 years, you have no African-American representation in a state that's got 33% African-American, which means that those who are serving that community now aren't thinking like you're thinking about those power plants or those rates of cancer because of water conditions. It's taxation without representation. And not to be cliche about that, you can't mute someone's representation in Congress.
Right.
And call yourself moving forward. Go ahead.
Yep. And just for a moment, I want to say to white America that this isn't good for anybody. The idea that because the exploited members of the Black community are working class men and women. The wealthy folks in the Black community aren't being exploited quite like that. This is an attack that is going to come to every working class person in the country, no matter what they look like. If you think that this division is about color, it isn't. It is, but it also isn't, because it's coming to you too.
We have to, one of the things I think we have to do, and that's why I started the conversation like I did, it's color is used to sort of divide us. But my father would say that the blood that binds us is thicker than the bridges that divide us. Mm-hmm. And it's really about representation of working people. We're trying to make the country more fair for everybody. It's obvious how the rich have carved out their sections of the country and the advantages that they have. And this is not really about, in my opinion, even the class of rich and poor. It's about equal representation. But if you're coloring this as black, you are making a terrible mistake. My friends in Appalachia are not coloring this as black. You don't have to. When you think about, the big sucking sound we heard when we gave jobs in Mexico, that wasn't all black. I mean, the average white family, as you know, can't afford a $500 additional medical bill in a month. We're all teetering on the edge of this economy. It was $6.99 gas in Chicago, $6.59 and $6.19 for regular. We're all there. We're all feeling it at the pump. We're feeling it at the grocery store. And that's not about color. This is about feeding our families. I don't know a woman, black, white, or brown or otherwise, who's not worried about a quality education for her son or daughter. And that has nothing to do with color. That's got to do with your relationship with the school and the teachers.
So you've taken on this storied organization. Many people, when they think of civil rights, they think of your dad's generation. How do you light up a new generation? How does a generation raised with as you say, raised fully enfranchised, raised with the full benefits of citizenship? How does that generation find its way into this new struggle?
Brilliant. There's I'm a faithful person, so there's a God factor in here, Edwin. Post-1965, I'm born in 1970. Just bear with me for a moment. We were born on second base of human rights and civil rights, but woke up and thought we hit a double. We thought that, the framers gave us our rights. We didn't really recognize the amount of rights caught up in the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act for our freedom and our ability to manage through society in America. That's the first thing. And so we somewhat took those rights for granted, as you're intuiting or intimating. And I think what we've got to do now is recognize that we did take those rights for granted, and we question whether we even needed the civil rights legislation, whether we even needed the Voting Rights Act. And what we're finding now is that because of a stroke of a pen by the Supreme Court, they have now, by dismantling this legislation, they have regressed the country. They have reverted us back to where we're all in the same boat. Every single one of us now is in the lineage of the abolitionists. We're in the lineage of John Brown. We're in the lineage of Denmark Vesey. We're in the lineage of Frederick Douglass, of W.E.B. Du Bois. Why? Because these are all freedom fighter people. And if you strip the Voting Rights Act of its power, you baptize us all in the freedom legacy, in the freedom lineage. So one thing about the decision they made is beautiful from a God perspective, a spiritual perspective, because now we're all the same. We're all pre-1965. And we all have to fight again to push up from this mean to regain our rights. And so we have to teach them and educate them long before, obviously we need to try to win these midterm elections. The Rainbow Push's plan is to try to register millions of voters this summer and into the fall and activate them, get them to turn out. My father would call them stones laying around. And what you see in inanimate objects and stones lying around are just things you step over and walk past. But if you're David with a slingshot and Goliath is on the side of you, there's power in those stones. And so these voters who are unregistered or these voters who are unmotivated, right now, there's stones lying around. But if we activate them and give them hope, they can take the House back.
I think we're going to take the House back.
Just as David slew that giant.
Yep, I think we're going to. I mean, I agree with you. People need to be active. I mean, you say that we've been brought back to pre-1965, but really these laws were meant, as we said earlier, to just enforce constitutional amendments that were passed after this horrid Civil War that we had, that the South brought upon this nation, and the rest of us accepted, as Lincoln said, and the 19th Amendment, which was ratified in 1920. So all we're trying to do is take these great amendments that are 100 years old and more and say they're the law of the land. And the Supreme Court has said the laws that enforce those are no longer there. So they're taking us back a whole lot further than 1965.
Well, I will tell you, we can, you're right, and we can make it theoretical if we want to. But it didn't take 24 hours or 48 hours for state legislatures in the South to begin to redraw the maps. And
yes, even while one election was underway.
Mm-hmm. That's unbelievable. So you just disenfranchised my vote after I voted.
Yep.
This is new territory for us here. So when we talk about, do we need these laws? We need this kind of enforcement. Oh, my gosh, because immediately the legislatures will take this kind of action. I can't believe there's not a modicum of decency in our political structure right now where folks would say, you know what, that's just not right. We can't. I'm not in your party, but I'm not going to disenfranchise those people. But that's what we're doing.
Of decency
and so we got to fight.
I'm fully partisan on this. There is a lot of decency out there, but none of it is in the MAGA Republican Party. I mean, a lot of people are shocked by this. A lot of people think it's wrong, and they don't care.
I'll accept that. I'll accept that as a full stop.
A friendly amendment, as they say. We have now we're looking at a new civil rights fight. Doesn't look like the old one. It's a different era. It looks different. I don't know if we know what it looks like yet. I'm convinced it's going to be far more diverse. It's not going to be just blacks and Jews and a handful of others. It's going to be, I think, a broader, more interesting coalition, a rainbow, as you say. It's going to represent. The
country's more ethnic now, so I think that's important. I think what's also important, what you intimated there, was that this is not just a moment. This potentially is an era. If you think about 1865 when the Civil War ended, and you think about the amendments that came between 65 and 1870, 13, 14, and 15th Amendments, and then the sellout Hayes-Tilden Compromise, 1877, I think. The song "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which is now known as our Black National Anthem, when it says, "We will march on till victory is won," that was written in 1900, 35 years after the Civil War, 23 years after Hayes-Tilden. All of the African-American Divine Nine fraternities and sororities were founded in the 1900s. All of the NAACP, right, 1908 or something, 1906. And you talk about the Urban League, 1920 or something like that, 1910. The point is, African Americans, after Plessy, organized in a way to be able to fight for another potentially 100 years. So I don't know how long we're going to have to organize ourselves to be ready to fight. But it is the midterm, but it's beyond the midterms because things don't move that fast. We are in an era or a period, not just a moment. So I want to encourage our listeners to prepare yourself mentally and physically, gird for the fight. And the legislation that we're able to win, I pray it's in my lifetime, has to be different than the last time. We really need a constitutional amendment protecting the right to vote. That's kind of where we have to get to. Now, that's a long ways off between 2/3 of this and 3/4 of that. But we can't leave it to each state by state to determine whether or not you can give someone water while they wait in line to vote, or whether you have a drop box in your neighborhood. It's just unfair. There has to be some level, some baseline uniformity in the fairness of political power sharing.
Yeah. Well, we've run ourselves out of time, so that's a great place to end. I look forward to participating with you and watching you lead this organization forward to grow it again, and to help find its place in this incredible era that we find ourselves in.
I thank you for having me. I'm grateful. I would love to come back and share with you some more. Can I just say that we're having our conference June 10th through June 13th here in Chicago. Our conference theme is fulfilling the American commitment to its people for the next generation. And literally, Edwin, at the basically the eve of the 250th anniversary of the nation's founding, we're going to examine kind of what commitments were made, what commitments need to be kept, and we're going to talk about what the 4th of July means to us today as a rainbow coalition of people, along with a bunch of fun actors and entertainers and lots of candy at the conference, but also a bunch of substance. So we'll be in Chicago.
I've been to that conference in the past. It's a great event.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're doing it, and it'll be a much better 4th of July than the mixed martial arts battle on the White House grounds.
I don't know that. My kids might disagree. We're looking forward to that, too.
Thank you, Yusef. I really appreciate your time.
June 14th, by the way. All right. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
773-763-9278. I'm taking your calls at 773-763-9278. Jim, as always, kick us off.
Yeah, hi, Edwin. As a young man, I watched Murrow, I watched Cronkite. But if you put those two in a starting gate with Amy Goodman, I would wager she win by 100 lengths, which was what Man of War won at Hawthorne. That's the longest winning margin in racing history. But she is fabulous. She's on at 11 o'clock at night. I don't need any platforms, any influencers, anybody else. Just take last night's show, for instance. She reports every night about the murder and torture of Palestinians, the bombing of Lebanon, the homeless people, how many children are killed every week. And then they had on our military running the Iran war, and he was asked several times, how many schools have been bombed? How many hospitals have been destroyed? Well, we don't know. All we know is one, but my point is, we have no respect for human life. I don't know how many centuries we have to go before people know how to talk peace or how to get along with anybody. But this is ridiculous. And you can't miss her. She's on 11 o'clock at night on this channel. I mean, I don't have to listen to anybody else because there's nobody gets off the hook with her, Edwin. I mean, she pins down everything to the last drop. And I like to say is, in talking about colonizing places, Ireland is finally going to get those 6 counties back. Sinn Féin is finally going to take the lead and get those 6 counties back. The King James, the Protestant daughter of Mary Queen of Scots, loaded up with Scotchmen there. And how many years is that? That's the beginning of the 17th century. Finally, you get rid of them. And I guarantee you, every Irish Republican Army guy that I know are going to be dancing in the streets. Edwin, have a great week. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. Thanks for kicking us off. Paul, quite a week, huh?
You know, every week, Edwin, there's a new metaphor or analogy, whichever, for how bad this jackass is. I really liked your opening remarks about if it can't be his oyster, it'll be his toilet. I mean, it's just the idea that he's painting the reflection pool like it's going to be a swimming pool and putting blue water in it. It's just, there's no, it's true. There's a new concept in physics that Donald Trump has discovered. There's no bottom. There's no low. It's just, everything is disgusting.
Right. There is no absolute zero in the physics of politics.
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah. And he's proven it. He's proving it. There's no absolute zero. It's just, it's unbelievable to me. And, you know,
I woke up in the middle of the night, Paul, and with this image in my head of him putting, you remember those tidy bowl pods? Those things that are meant to clean toilets that turn them blue?
Yeah.
And I had this image of him just walking, like dropping them in the reflecting pool, you know, just, oh God.
Well, if he paints the damn bottom of it blue like it's his giant swimming pool, it won't reflect. And I've been there once. Yeah, it was in the summer of 1971.
Yeah.
I was 11. It was just before I went into 7th grade. And my mom took us because my parents had taken my older brothers to Washington, D.C., so she thought it was important that she take me and my younger brother. It was, brutally hot July. It was just, I remember that. But I also just remember that image from the Lincoln Memorial and looking at and then astonishingly, because Mom and they said, well, we're going to drive over to the Washington Monument. I said, my young brother, I said, we're going to walk. And I was astonished at how far it is. It's like, it's right there. It's right there. How come it's taken? Even once you get to the lawn, it's a long way to the actual Washington Monument, It's just, this guy is just, and I've told you before, I won't go into that, but what I learned about when my brother and I were acting like a couple of squirrely rascals in the Capitol building, and one of the woman who was about in her mid-50s, an official there, grabbed us both by the ear and said, "You boys, that's enough." And I thought, oh, you're in big crap trouble, man. And my mom acted like she didn't know us. So she said, "Where are your parents?" Anyway, and when I saw January 6th, I remembered, why those guys, it made me so angry considering that this woman made us respect where we were. You're not going to run around here pushing each other and hiding behind stuff and laughing and being little jerks, little rascals, 8, 11. But I wonder, is the Constitution, is this just irrevocably broken? Irrevocably, it's just, this will be a chronic, there are some things that, for instance, I learned from my late partner, once a cancer patient, always a cancer patient. You're in remission, yeah, but you always have it. And this is something that we're always going to have, this era. And maybe we've had it all along, or maybe it's just that, what was undemocratic that people of color have lived with through this entire history of this country, that's finally hitting us regular white people too, and that's what I'm so incensed about. But you know what, Edwin? It's really scary. In 2021, when my dad got COVID at age 93, he could have survived, I think, because he made it out of the ICU. released to rehab. But my dad, who was at that age, a guy who walked 4 miles a day, was still playing his trombone at age 93, had played professionally for, decades, 7 decades. And he made zero progress in rehab. And after 20 days, Medicare doesn't pay, and they sent him home. And I thought, he's decided that's enough. This is not the world he wants to live in anymore. It's not his world. He could have survived, but he hated Trump. Although he had voted mostly Republican all of his life, except he voted for Obama, and he voted for Hillary, and he voted for Biden. He could not stand Donald Trump. But when this hit him, and he didn't believe it was real. He didn't believe that COVID was a real state. He couldn't believe it. But when he got it, he went, "Oh, that's it. It's time to hang it up." And if he saw this the last 5 years, he would say, "Yep, I made the right choice. I made the right choice."
Yep. Well, all of us are going to have that choice to make again, and I think the country is making it. The man is unpopular for reasons we've talked about 1,000 times. He went to China and got humiliated. Did you see the story that she actually sat him on a lower chair or took a cushion away so that he was just physically, everything about it was humiliating to America. And what president of the United States goes to China and never says the word freedom? You know what? He does not care. He is not fit. I've said it 1,000 times for the job, but really that he's going to be there until he's not there. What's not fit are the Republicans who continue to wrap their arms around this terrible man doing these terrible things as if it's normal. And let me just say this last thing. Yeah. I read a lot of articles that say the Democrats have to, and I just want to say to everybody listening, the Democrats aren't there to save the democracy. They're a political party. Political parties do things like organize debates for primaries or figure out how the primary calendar schedule or maybe raise money for candidates. But the democracy doesn't belong to any political party. It belongs to us. And we're the ones who have to save it.
Well, then, we have to. I feel like a sucker that even though I've been studying the Constitution kind of academically for over 20 years, that I still have this ideological viewpoint of what it is, that it's about freedom and liberty. When I've known for decades that no, it's about power. And when I first learned that, I said, no, it's not about power.
You're right.
It's about
it is about power. It's absolutely about power. But it was written, and this is what this court does not understand, and the great courts before it did, that you have to understand the way it was written in the light of the Declaration of Independence. If you take that light away, then it allows slavery. Then it allows. Then it is all about property rights and not about human freedom. Well, that's not true, not all, but the balance is skewed. But if you look at it in the light of what we said we were doing with that declaration and what we said we believe about human beings in that declaration, then you have to read it in the way that you think about it.
Right, and as you said, and you played the clip, that when Fox News tries to help Trump walk back his idiotic statement that he doesn't think about American finances, and he, as you said,
he doubles down
forward in the most stupid. And he says, "Oh, and I told my people, I'm going to screw up your numbers for a little while, but this has got to be done." It's like, what he doesn't understand? That war is not about military might. It is ultimately always about economic and financial interests. That's where we lost from day one, because just take gasoline prices alone. They're up now 60-some% for this period of 70 plus days, whatever it's been, 77 days now. Well, if it doesn't go below where it was, 60-some% for 77 days, just to break even on gasoline, we've lost the war. It's just telling us that we've destroyed their military. Whatever we destroyed, it's not a matter of how much you've blooded the other guy's nose. It has nothing to do with that.
No, this war never should have happened. And you know what? I'm going to quote or paraphrase Donald Trump. You know what? And it never would have happened if Kamala Harris was president. It never would have happened if Joe Biden was president. It never would have happened if Barack Obama was president. It never would have happened if Bill Clinton. It might have happened with George Bush. The jury's out on that because of his Iraq mistake. But maybe he learned from that Iraq mistake and it wouldn't have happened. But you know what? No sane president would have done this. Anyway, Paul, I got to run because we got a couple more people to go. Thank you as always.
Yeah,
all right, 773-763-9278. Al. Hello, Al.
Good morning, good afternoon, Edwin. Good show as usual. You just had the Jackson on, and they made the stone analogy, and we just have to gather up all those stones and take them to the polls, and we'll be okay. Then I was going to talk about, you had a guest on a few weeks ago talking about pink slime journalism, Emily Horn, and that's what they're going to be trying to do to us. And they're going to be trying to take away the attention economy, which is something that, a word I learned from Adam Mockler. And we have to take over the attention economy, and we see it what they're trying to do everywhere because
let me ask you a question about that. Because when you talk about the attention economy, of course, you're talking about like whose narrative gets told all the time. Yes. And Donald Trump gets attention better than anybody I've ever seen. But you know what gets attention more than Donald Trump? Your bills. the gas bill, the electricity bill. Yes. And I think the attention economy is going to be eaten up by the real disasters this man has brought to the country.
And that's a good thing. We just wish we never had to go this far to have people see it.
I know you don't mean it's a good thing. Better. It's politically useful, but it is definitely not a good thing.
Yes. I know that's what you got that, and you're correct. And you have a new name for me to look up is Jonathan Larsen. I had to note him and already found his Substack. But
good.
It's just all interesting. And we have the gerrymandering, which you talked about, and we do that in Illinois. I'd like to understand that more. We are a gerrymandered state. We see it all the time, and we should be a little more open about why we set up the boundaries the way we did here.
I'm going to devote some time in a future show to ways that we can make map making less of a powerful tool for the people in power. And there are things that we can do about that. Proportional. I talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show with Elliott Morris. Proportional representation, multi-member districts. There are all kinds of ways people are thinking about taking that tool away from those in power. And returning it back to us.
Yeah, just a couple real quick things here is we have to use our power to tell people about all this and get the vote out, and then with what just happened, the gutting of Section 2 of the Civil Rights Act and how quickly the red states changed tells you we needed it. And then I think it was 2013 where we gutted Section 5, and instantly we had all the southern states making changes. And so that tells you that we needed it, And I like this diluting of the red states, and hopefully we can make sure that it turns into their problem. We just have to get more people out to vote in all these diluted red areas now. So, and just,
Thank you, Al.
Going.
That's absolutely right. I agree. Totally agree. Thank you for calling in. Thank you for being part of this. Penny, I think you're calling from Lansing.
Hello.
Hello there.
I really want to believe that there's enough Republicans that have enough courage to see what's going on, how ill Donald Trump is, and get rid of him. I remember when President Nixon resigned, and Senator Robert Dole, may he rest in peace, and several other Republican senators went to President Nixon and confronted him with reality.
Yeah,
but I
Barry
understand
Goldwater was
why
one
they.
of them. Yep.
Pardon?
Barry Goldwater was one of them.
Yes,
So
he
it was the right wing of the Republican Party that said you have to go.
Because this paintbrush is not just going to paint Donald Trump. It's going to splash back on the people who protected him and supported him. And I personally will hold them responsible. They like to preach personal responsibility to everybody else, but I understand why they don't do it, because Donald Trump is so vengeful. They're afraid for themselves and they're afraid for their families.
Penny, there are in this country lots of people who said they were Republicans who understand what a terrible man this is. But the ones you're talking about are the elected Republicans, the ones who are sitting
Correct.
in Congress and sitting in the state houses, right? And they're finding their poll numbers are shrinking. Many of them are going to lose their elections. And you know what? They should lose those elections. It is, if you cannot, let me say this differently. They are not allowing Congress to have a vote on sending young men and women over to the Persian Gulf to fight a war, right? No one's even, they're saying you can't even have that conversation, but they're saying, and we can't have that conversation because we're afraid about our lives, because our president might sick those January 6th vigilantes on me and my family. They should quit Congress in shame. You cannot do that job if you are afraid to do it. They should quit today rather than say, "Oh, I'm scared, so I'm gonna just bow down." That is disgraceful. We are a great country, and I have no. You hit a sore spot for me there, Penny. Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to me.
Oh no, thank you for calling, and I really appreciate your being part of this. All right, I have only a couple of minutes left, and Nancy, I'm giving them to you.
Oh, wow. I wasn't sure I was going to make it. Anyway, finally, we're starting to actually say what should have been said long ago. We would have never had this piece of garbage in our White House for a second time, which really aggravates me, because this undemocratic, broken two-party system isn't working, and no one wants to say it. You could sit there all day long, 24/7, telling me all the stuff they're doing wrong. Everything that, oh, my God, he's doing it. Guess what? Why is he doing it? Because he can. Because nobody is stopping him, ever. If the Democrats would have ever learned how to fight back, and I'm not talking about all the Democrats, because the Democratic Party is not a united party. We have to put up with the moderates who keep stopping everything. They'd rather fight the progressives than stand up for their country and fight back against the cons. And don't give me that crap about the cons are afraid of him. No, they're not. They wanted this. Why do you think they pushed him into there? And because the Democrats don't fight back hard enough, here we are. Here's our system of government, 250 years. Did we abolish slavery? No, we did not. We still have it. And last week's not-so-Supreme Court proved it. We're going backwards. Did we get money out of politics? Hell no. We've got more money in there than ever. Who's running the country and the world now? Corporations and billionaires. Who's running our media? They took our media away from us a long time ago. And we, the people, I call the majority of us, the ones who actually have a functioning brain and believe in democracy, I call them we, the people. That's our majority. Well, guess what? We're not being represented. We're not being fought for. They're not fighting for us. And then they turn around and say, well, what are you going to do about it? You know what? Give me the money, the military, and the power that these billionaires have, and I'll tell you what I'll do with it. I'll fix it.
Thank you for that edit, because it is radio. Yeah. Look, we have a lot of great ideas out there. We need the power and the will to do it. I do believe that that the Democrats that you don't like, that the old version of let's make a deal is off the table now. I think when Democrats win, the people who put them there will not let them. I don't want to make this. I don't want to say it's equivalent, but the MAGA base has forced Republican politicians to take stands that normal people wouldn't take. The base of the Democratic Party is going to force politicians to take stands too. Hopefully, they are better than that. They're not just left versions of what MAGA does on the right, but they're pro-democracy, pro-people versions, and we will not put up with any less. So I think that after this next election, the people who are going to go to Congress, and by the way, to state houses, and by the way, to win some state Supreme Courts, they are going to have to put people first. And we won't put up with it.
Yeah, but what about the gerrymandering they were supposed to get rid of? Because they didn't, we now have,
I disagree with you on that, Nancy, because they couldn't have. If they passed the John Lewis bill, right? That's what you're talking about, right? When Biden was first elected?
Or get rid of gerrymandering. They've been talking about that for years. Or what about the Electoral College?
Here's why I don't think they could have done it. Because you have to have Supreme Court reform. Because this Supreme Court would have said any law they pass to get rid of gerrymandering is unconstitutional. So we need to reform the Supreme Court.
Problem. They're not getting expanding or getting rid of or whatever they have to do for the not so Supreme Court. They're letting them
it's coming,
make
Nancy.
law now.
As long as just trust, just hear me. I believe it's coming. We will have Supreme Court reform in the next Congress. But we've run out of time today. Thank you all for being part of the show, for calling, for listening, and for being so supportive. My gosh, I've been doing this for almost 4 years now. Who knew? All right. See you next week, guys.